Kyla. Jy gaan ons 'n klein bietjie breek. Dan gaan jy 'n studiesessie inwerk weer vir geografie. Dan gaan ek jou toets vir jou gee. En dan moet ons al amper ry. Okay.
Manual. Hi, Mr. J. Hope you're well. Get some volume up here. My ears are still shut. Just waiting for Emmanuel. Hello, Mornay. How's it, Emmanuel? How are you doing? Good?
Yeah, how are you doing, brother?
I'm well, man. Did you get some sleep?
Yeah, I got some sleep, yeah.
Good news, man. Wise man always rests, for he knows the next day will be a long day.
What's going on with the ears, man?
Still a bit
Infection?
of problem. But
Is it
yeah.
infection?
No, this one I fractured the eardrum.
Oh,
And the other one is also a bit fractured, but at least I can still hear. It happens every year, especially with spearfishing and stuff like that.
oh, spearfishing. What do
Mm.
you mean? Like, how did that happen? Like, when it just starts hurting, or is it just like because of the sound?
No, it's stupidity. To be honest, sometimes you spearfish and you see this fish you really want, and you have to go a bit deeper, even though your breath is up,
Oh,
and you don't equalize. You just go, and then all of a sudden you just hear this ding and this like squeaky sound, and then you feel the warmth come out of your ear. Normally, that's normally when it starts bleeding and stuff like that. But it happens quite often. But I think now it's just fractured.
oh, I was like, okay. So you went down into like pressure wise, it just popped your ears.
Yeah, sometimes it's spearfishing, sometimes when you're shooting a gun, because I'm left-handed, right? So when I'm shooting left-handed, I normally put my thumb down to block my one ear. But this ear is already deaf because I never block it. So it's also going under a bit of strain. Should look after our bodies, but yeah, like I said, it's stupidity.
As long as you do better, brother, everything will be fine.
Yeah, it's a bit harsh now. So when I'm listening to something or listening to a teaching or watching news, everything is like volume is way up. My family keeps saying, this is too hard. Just put it softer. And I keep on telling them, I can't hear. I have to put it that hard, that hard. So just excuse me on the live when I'm not hearing properly or not hearing the question correctly. I'm trying. I've got my volume way up. I actually need a loudspeaker. It will be much easier.
Um, let's hope. Let's hope. I'm just trying to think. Damn, I don't know. Spearfishing did that. That's kind of like deep wise. Like when does it start to pop? Like 30, 40 meters down, or because
No, no, it's not even that. Around about 10 to 11 meters. Because you have to, as you go down, equalize, pop your ears for the pressure. And sometimes I forget. I just go because I'm full of adrenaline. I'm seeing this fish. I want to chase it and get it. And then it just pops. Like I said, it's stupidity. It's all it is. It's nothing else.
so the teaching was on Romans Romans 14, right?
Yes, we're going to be reading Romans 14 because you'll see that Romans 14 is one of the claims most Christians make to say that, see, that all foods are clean, when it's got nothing to do with what is clean and unclean food. It's got nothing to do with that. It's all about fasting.
Okay. I personally, when I was the only part that got me is verse 21. It just made me think it doesn't make sense how doesn't make sense. Why does it tell you in the beginning that, all food is clean, right? Someone decides to eat all food and one doesn't. And then it goes on saying, it is good not to eat meat or drink, nor whatever by which your brother stumbles. And then that's the only correlation that I saw to any sort of stopping of eating for a period of time, which is fasting.
Yes. What drink is unclean?
What drink is unclean?
Yes. Because it says all meat and drink, right? Do not be a stumbling block with meat and drink. No drink is unclean. So obviously it can't be talking about foods. It's talking about an action. And this is some background I want to give you before we even touch Romans. Is giving you the background of what is being said. So we have to go a chapter before, actually two chapters. We'll just go one, just for argument's sake. Show you the context where it's coming from and realize what it's all about. Because Paul, like we know, is hard to understand. But why is he hard to understand? That's the question we must ask. And once we can answer that and we realize what Paul is saying, we can now go back to the prophets and see what he's speaking about and add it to here and see, oh, okay. Because there's some stumbling blocks for people that do not read scripture or study scripture. They just read out of context. And that is what causes them to stumble. This is why people, and even brothers like us, like you, Emmanuel, it's hard for us to explain these things because we must go and study it. It's not just a normal answer because you have been warned that Paul's letters are hard to understand. So make sure you make a note that it's hard to understand. But the question we must ask is, why is it hard to understand? It's a question very few people ask. Why is his letters hard to understand? Right?
I would say they're hard to understand because a lot of the things that he quotes is from the Old Testament, and the things that he talks about are like parables, like Yeshua. He kind of doesn't just give you the answer. He kind of speaks in a certain way that is not like you, me speak on like a normal conversation, right? He speaks in like coded messages.
Yes. Not actually encoding. To understand Paul's letters and why it's hard to understand, or we can call it his writings, right? Is because we do not have context of what he's answering. He's always saying, I'm writing to you, but where's the letter that he received or the report he received? For example, in the Galatians, he says, oh, you foolish Galatians, why? What report did he get? Where's that report? It's not in scripture. So you're reading a one-sided letter. Paul is writing to someone for doing something wrong, but you don't have the report. So you have to figure out through his letters what it is they were doing wrong. This is what makes Paul hard to understand. Besides that, there are many things else. So let's quickly just go to Romans. Let's start. Just this. We need this context and background, and then we'll go to Romans 14. Okay, just go to Romans 7:1.
Okay. Or do you not know, brothers, for I speak to those knowing the Torah, that the Torah rules over a man as long as he lives?
So Paul is saying he speaks to those who know the law, that the law rules over man for as long as he lives. For Ecclesiastes says the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments. But Paul here is making something very clear. Do you not know, brothers? I'm speaking to those who know the law. If you have no knowledge in the law or understanding in the law, don't read Paul, because then you're twisting Paul to your own destruction, right? If that is the case, also, we know it very well, and you know these scriptures that I'm giving you. I'm giving it for a reason, because I need to paint a background before we go to Romans 14. Just go to Romans chapter 2, verse 18 and 20.
And know the desire of Elohim, and approve what is superior, being instructed out of the Torah, and trusting that you yourself are a guide to the blind and light to those who are in darkness.
So you know what God's will is because you are instructed in the Torah. No one can know the will of God unless you're instructed in the Torah. That is what Paul is saying, and that is fact. That's scripturally accurate. And now you know that you are blind and instructor of babies because you are instructed in the Torah. So this is the background of Paul. So if you do not, and this is all still in Romans, without this background, don't read Romans. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. But if you have the background in the law and Paul starts saying things and speaking things, it becomes very clear, because you'll hear Paul saying the following things. He says, I say this, not the scripture or not the Lord. Now he says, okay, but now the Lord says this. He's making a distinction every time between the law and man's way of thinking. The law and man's way of thinking. He's trying in an earthly sense to make you understand the Torah. So, and all of this is why we get the warning in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, right? When it says the lungs, just read it quickly for us.
So then, beloved ones, looking forward at this, we do our utmost to be found in peace, spotless and blameless, and reckon our patience of our Master as deliverance, as our brother Paul wrote to you according to wisdom given to him, as also in the letters speaking concerning these matters, in which some are hard to understand, which those who are untaught and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they also do the other scriptures.
Those who are untaught and not instructed prove to their own destruction. Why is Peter saying this? Because it says God will teach us, and when God teaches us, He will show us His righteousness. He will teach us in the law before we even get the sanctification of the Messiah, the blood of the Messiah. Right? So you have to be learned, because Paul is saying, do you not know, brothers, that I speak to those who know the law? So when he's speaking to Gentiles, he's trying to explain something in the law which the Gentiles don't have. They do not know what the law is. It's new to them. It's a new thing because they weren't part of the law. They were divorced, right? So keep that in mind in Romans. Let me just give you a couple of examples of what I'm saying. Just go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7.
Verse.
1 Corinthians chapter 7. Just read verse 1, the first part.
And concerning the matters you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of whoring, let each one have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband.
Okay, so here is something that should make your ears go open and say, okay, hang on, wait. Because here's why Paul is hard to understand. It says there, now concerning the things whereof you wrote unto me, Paul, right? Someone wrote something to Paul. And now here in Corinthians, he's giving an answer. But the question is never asked. What did they write to Paul for him to give an answer like he's giving now? We do not know. We have to read what Paul's answer is and know the Torah and then understand, okay, they might have been asking X, Y, or Z, according to the framework and structure we have that Paul is answering for. Because he clearly states, concerning the things you wrote to me. Okay, good. What did they write to him? Where is that letter? Why is that not in scripture? You understand? This is why Paul is hard to understand. Because Paul, you need to take Paul is a stumbling block for many. You have to take his letters and decipher what the people wrote to him for him to give this feedback that he's giving here, for example, in Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 to 9. He's giving feedback about a marriage, which is actually about fasting. What was the question on the letter they wrote to Paul for him to subscribe an answer like he's giving now? Well, no one would know unless you are instructed in the law. You'll quickly realize, oh, okay, this is why he's answering like this. Okay, they're asking about fasting there. This is interesting. Because you are instructed in the law. Because remember what Paul said. Acts 24, verse 13 to 15. I myself, Paul, believe in all things written in the law and the prophets. So he's always speaking what the heart is full of, the mouth will speak the law, and he'll quote according to the prophets. So Paul here in Romans is speaking to Gentiles who has gotten an awakening. Crucial to understand. If there's one note in this teaching I could make you understand now, the first heading would be awakening. He's speaking to those who are going through an awakening. It's crucial to understand because you'll see what the prophets would say about this and what the Gentiles asked Paul about this awakening. Okay, so let me give you an example where we are now in Corinthians. Just carry on reading that for us. Let me show you that when you are instructed in the Torah, it becomes quite easy to understand what he's saying. Even though we don't have the letter that they wrote to him concerning these things he's answering on. So read all the way to 9. Just an example.
And concerning the matters you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of whoring, let each one have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife what is her due, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does, and likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except with agreement for a time to give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, so that Satan does not try you because of your lack of self-control. And I say this as a conscience, not as a command. For I wish that all men were even as I am myself, but each one has his own gift from Elohim, one in his own way and one in another. And I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they do not have self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn.
Okay, so here we see in verse 1 that now concerning the things whereof you wrote to me, Paul, right? Now he's giving an answer. Let me answer you. So Paul is now answering them. Just read verse 4. Let me quickly read it. The wife has no power over the body, but the husband does. And likewise also the husband has no power of his own body, but the wife. Why are they saying this? Because he's instructing them in the Torah. Because what he's saying here is in the Torah. So why is he saying this? Because it has to do with fasting. This is about awakening. This is why they were this great commission sent to the Gentiles to give them the awakening. Okay? So what he's quoting here is Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Just read that quickly.
You said verse 24?
Genesis chapter 2, verse 24.
Yeah, verse 24. And his concubine, whose name was Ruana, also bare Teba, and Gahan, and Tahash, and Mahak.
Are you in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24?
My bad. For this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh.
So why does a man not have authority over why does the wife have no authority over her own body, but the husband does? And why does the husband have no authority over his body, but the wife does? Why?
Because they become one flesh.
It's one flesh. You are one. So your wife has authority over you, and you have authority over her, for you are one. This is what Paul is speaking about here. He is quoting the Torah. Just you'll read about it in the New Testament also. Just go to Matthew 19. The Messiah speaks about it. Also quoting the Torah. Matthew 19, verse 3 to 6.
3 to 6. And the Pharisees came to him, trying him, and saying to him, it is right for a man to put away his wife for every reason? And he answering said to them, did you not read, he who has made the beginning, made the male and female? And said, for this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and cleave to his wife, and they shall two become one flesh, so that they no longer are two, but one flesh. Therefore, what Elohim has joined together, let man not separate.
Okay, so it's also quoted in Ephesians 5:28. Just go there quickly. And now we'll start the cipher here in Corinthians. And with this knowledge, we'll start passing it on all the way to Romans 14. And you see how intelligent Paul was.
In this way, husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for he no longer has ever hated his own flesh, but feeds and cherishes it, as also the master does with the body, or the assembly.
Okay, so in Paul it says there, the wife has no power over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, also the husband has no power over the body, but the wife does. He's quoting Torah. He's speaking to them in earthly terms without quoting scripture. He's saying, well, because his understanding is now what? They are one. That's why you don't have that authority. You are one. You are one body. The wife and the husband becomes one. So you can't have authority over her, nor she over you. You are one. You are one household, if I can put it that way. So Paul is doing that, right? Read verse 5.
Of Corinthians,
Yes.
do not deprive one another except with agreement for time, to give yourself to fasting and prayer, and come together again, so that Satan does not try you because of your lack of self-control.
So we don't have the letter because he's replying, verse 1, to a letter concerning they wrote to Paul. So he's now replying. So now we see, okay, they were asking, when we're fasting, should we have intercourse with one another? Should we sustain for a long time? And he says, yes, but not too long. For you are weak in your bodies, lest Satan comes and tempts you. Also about fasting. Why? Because it's about an awakening. But we don't have the letter that they wrote to Paul. We have to make the assumptions based off what he is saying here. And like I just showed you in the prior verse, he keeps on quoting the Torah. This is why he says the man won't rule over the woman not over the man, as they are one. Right? They are one body. This is what it means. So, verse 7. For I would that all men were even as myself. Paul. Paul can abstain without a wife. He has self-control. Right? He doesn't need a wife. He can fast and do whatever he wants. He does not have that desire. But every man has the proper gift of God. So he's saying that every man has a certain gift. Paul has one, others have others, right? Crucial to understand, make a note about this. Every man has his own gift of God. It's crucial to understand Romans 14. So just write there in your notes, every man, this verse, has his own gift of God. Paul's words, right? One after his manner and another after that. So everyone is stronger in his own way. For example, like we just read here, Paul is saying, I wish you were all like me, but if you are weak, go get yourself a wife so you don't fall in temptation and lust. Let your wife satisfy that. Become one with her. Paul doesn't need that. He even says, sometimes it's good to marry if you are weak, and it's not good to marry. You are created in a certain way. You have certain gifts. Paul has very, very strong gifts and convictions. He is speaking to those who are weak in the flesh. Following? Okay, so based on this, if we read Corinthians 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 4, now concerning these things whereof you wrote unto me, he is answering their questions concerning fasting and abstaining or be what's that English word? Daniel?
English word for
Celibate,
sex?
being
Oh,
celibate.
celibate, yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, being celibate when you are fasting, because this is crucial. It's very important to be celibate while fasting. But they say, how long? Well, if you are weak, don't do it. Don't restrain yourself for too long, lest temptation comes in because you are weak and you'll probably cheat. This is what he's speaking about. But it's also about fasting. We can gather that much, right? Because verse 1 says, now concerning these things whereof you wrote unto me, Paul. What did they write to Paul? We don't have those letters. We have to use Paul's letters and realize, okay, probably speaking about this or speaking about that concerning the context of his letter and his answer. But we don't have the questions. It's not given to us. It's not in scripture. That's why I always say Paul's letters are good to read. Read them. But this is exactly what they are. They are letters. Letters that you are reading. It would be way easier if we had the question letter they wrote to Paul and Paul's answer. Now we can put two and two together. But we are left with something to do, to figure out what he is saying. This is why some things that Paul is writing about are hard to understand. Those who are instructed in the law can decipher it, like I just showed you. They were quoting the law, the Torah now, yeah, with the marriage and a woman becoming one. So because we are instructed in the law, like Romans 7:1 says, do you not know, brothers, that I write to those who know the law? And Romans chapter 2, verse 17 and 18 says, and you know his will because you are instructed in the law. Because we have this background and we are instructed in the law, we can decipher what Paul is saying. Where normal Christian that says the law is done away with will twist these words to their own destruction. Because they don't have the letter with the questions written to Paul. They only have the answers that Paul gives. This is what confuses most people. I hope you guys are understanding. I don't want to linger on this too long. I'm just trying to give you background. So if you go to another example, Galatians 3:1. Oh, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Yeshua the Messiah has been evidently set forth, crucified amongst you? We don't have the context of Galatians. He's writing a letter to Galatians saying, you foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Why? Because they're turning back to the traditions of men. If you read Galatians, you realize that it's about the law of sin and death. So this is the context that I'm speaking about that confuses people, right? So just go to Acts 17. Read verse 10 and 11.
And the brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Beron. Sorry. 10 and 11. And the brothers immediately sent out Paul and Silas away by night to Berea, who, having come, went to the congregation of the Jews. Now these were more notable than those in Thessalonica, who received the word with great eagerness and searched the scripture daily if these words were so.
Okay, so these Bereans received the scriptures eagerly, and this message eagerly, and they searched the scriptures for this message, right? Like we are doing now. We're going to go search for Romans 14 to understand. They searched eagerly. They tested every word. This is what we should do. We want to know what Romans 14 says. Let's go search the scriptures. For Paul himself said, I believe all things written in the law and the prophets. Meaning that when he's speaking out of the mindset of the law and the prophets. Having this understanding, we can start deciphering. He says, do you not know, brothers, that I speak to those who know the law? Confirming that he believes all things written in the law and the prophets. He says, and you know his will and approve of things that are more superior because you are instructed in the law. Paul is getting a congregation of Gentiles in Romans to try repent and turn back to God. This repentance, this turning aside from sin and getting back to their first love, to God's ways, right? So he's trying to show them how to do it via his knowledge, which is the law. But sometimes he speaks out of his own, sometimes he quotes scripture. Bearing this in mind, we never have the letters that are written to Paul concerning the questions that he's answering. Like we read earlier. It's not there. It's not available. It's not in scripture. We only have Paul's replies to letters and questions that were asked to him. It would have been so much easier if we had the letter they wrote and Paul's reply. Now everything can be put in context, but we don't. So we are left with deciphering what Paul's saying by the law and the prophets, something he believed, the background of where he's coming from to answer these people. He does not answer them with his own understanding, and when he does, he says, do you not know, brothers, that I speak out of myself, not of God? He makes it very clear. So sometimes he gives an opinion and he makes it clear, and sometimes he speaks with the authority of God, which was given to him. So with this understanding, we have to go and start all of this. You understand what I'm saying and coming from, Emmanuel?
Yep, I'm following so far.
Okay, because this is all for you. Stop me if I'm confusing you at any time. Okay, so to understand Romans 14, we need to go back a couple of chapters, actually 3, but we'll go back 1. I just want to show you something into the context that we are going into Romans 14, so you can see who he's speaking to, why he's saying these things, and remember everything that we covered now. Make notes of everything because it becomes crucial to uncipher Romans 14. So, to understand Romans 14, we need to go back a couple of chapters, and we have to remember that the New Testament, Romans, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all of these books did not exist. So when the Bereans searched the scriptures, they did not go to the book of Romans and research Romans, because Romans is written about them. When the Bereans searched the scriptures, they had the Torah and the prophets. They went to the Torah and the prophets concerning what Paul was telling them to search the scriptures to see if they are true. So always, this is what Christians normally do. They make this mistake, assuming that the New Testament existed at the time that these things took place, when it never existed. This New Testament or renewed covenant that these Christians are claiming was not written when the Messiah was there. It was written years after. Years and years after. They only had the Torah and the prophets, the Psalms, those things. From what a Christian calls the New Testament, where it begins backwards all the way to Genesis. That's all they had. They did not have revelation that was given after the death of the Messiah. All these books did not exist. Remember this as we carry on. So, let's just jump to Romans 13. So read Romans 13, verse 1 and 2 quickly.
Yeah. Let every being be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from Elohim, and the authorities that exist are appointed by Elohim.
Verse 2.
So he who opposes the authority withstands the institution of Elohim, and those who withstand shall bring judgment on themselves.
So here's something very interesting saying. It's about authorities, right? Remember what we said earlier. Paul is speaking to a people that is coming to an awakening. The peels of their eyes fell off. Now he's answering them. He says, let every soul be subject unto a higher power, for there is no power but God. The powers that be are ordained by God. So if God sets up a king or a ruler over you, it's always for two reasons, either to lead you or either to oppress you. We'll see as we carry on. So these people are asking Paul something, and Paul is giving them answers, right? Because remember, he's speaking to a Gentile nation who has a king Herod over him, who is not out of Judah. They are searching the scriptures and realizing, but it says that the Messiah will sit on the seat of David and rule over us. Why is this guy ruling over us? Hence the gospel of a kingdom. Heart repentance, turn back, then you'll have a king that rules over you. So this is about awakening, right? Just in verse 2. Whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the ordinance of God. You can't resist if a governing authority is over you. If God appointed that authority to rule over your country or you govern over you, it's there either to bring you, oppress you into labor pain so you can turn back to God, or it's someone good like King David that will rule and set you free. This is how God appointed it, and we'll see why. Whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the ordinances of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves, damnation. So he's saying, if God appointed someone over you, do not think that you can throw him down. He was appointed by God's authority. By you resisting him, you're resisting God who appointed him, either for good or for bad. So if you think that you can do anything to get out of the governing authority that's ruled and put over you today, you are gravely mistaken. You cannot go against the authority of God. He either appoints someone over you to rule and oppress you or to set you free. This is the whole case through the whole history of Scripture. And we'll get there now. So this is about honoring a king, or honoring in our language. Let me speak like Paul. In our language, my wisdom. Honoring a president or a ruler that is governing over you. For he appoints your brothers and sisters that have to clean the streets and do all the work. Honor him, pay your taxes. This is what Paul is saying, so that they can be paid and also eat. For God has appointed him to rule over you. Now these people in Romans are asking these questions, saying, but this king is ruling over us, and we are searching the scriptures. He's not supposed to rule. The promise was made to a lineage out of David, who is out of Judah, for the Messiah must come back and sit on the throne. And Paul is speaking about this. Always remember this, because this is now how we're going to understand Romans 14. You'll see how beautiful it becomes. If you're instructed in the law, it's much easier to understand, right? So, whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the ordinances of God, for God appoints up kings and rulers. We'll get to that scripture. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation or judgment, if I can put it that way. Okay. Verse 3. Just read verse 3 for us and stop, Emmanuel.
For those ruling are an object of fear, not to good works, but to evil. Do you wish to be not afraid of authority? Do the good, and you shall have praise from it.
Okay. So Paul is saying, those people asking him, those who rule over you rule out of fear. It's evil. Why is he saying this? Because Paul is instructed in the law, remember? Why is he saying to honor a king that rules evil? Because the king is appointed to put judgment on God's children so that they can be oppressed and turn back to him, as the prophet said. This is why Paul is saying this. So he's speaking to an audience that is awakening and asking them certain questions, and he's giving the answers. So we don't have the letters written to Paul, but out of these answers, because we know the law, we will not twist these letters to our own destruction. We will now, like the Bereans, search the scriptures to go find the truth, right? So, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil, to the evil, which thou them are afraid of. Why then are you afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. Okay, so go to 1 Samuel.
Okay, hold on.
Let me show you what Paul is speaking about.
You said First Samuel?
Yeah. 1 Samuel.
Okay.
We want to understand what this verse 3 means, because it says this ruler that's there is evil. But Paul is saying, honor the king, even though he's evil, honor him. Why? Because Paul is saying if there's a king, he is appointed by God. Do not think that a king establishes himself. God appoints a king, either for good or for bad. Right? I know it doesn't make sense now. Once we are done, you'll see why it's so important to be instructed in the Torah. Why Romans 14 has got nothing to do with food, all about fasting. So, 1 Samuel chapter 8.
Okay.
Just read verse 1 quickly.
And it came to be when Samuel was old, and he made his sons rule over Israel.
Okay, so this is about the king, the Samuel, that was old, and he appointed his sons to rule over Israel. They are called judges, not kings. Israel at the time didn't have kings. They wanted kings. They asked for kings like the heathen nations, right? Now read from verse 3 all the way to 22.
Okay. But his sons did not walk in the ways, and turned aside after own gain, and took bribes, and twisted right ruling. And all the elders of Israel gathered together, and came to Samuel at Ramah, and said to him, Look, you are old, and now your sons do not walk in the ways. Now appoint for us a sovereign, to rule us like all the nations. But the word was evil in the eyes of Samuel, when they said, Give us a sovereign to rule us. So Samuel prayed to Yah, and Yah said to Samuel, Listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from reigning over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Misraim, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other mighty ones. So they are doing to you. And now listen to their voice, but you shall certainly warn them, and shall make known to them the ruling of the king who does reign over them. And Samuel spoke all the words of Yah to the people who asked him for a king, and said, This is the ruling of the king who does rule over you. He shall take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen, and they shall run before his chariots and appoint commanders over his thousands and commanders over his 50s, or to plow his ground and reap his harvest, or to make his weapons and equipment for his chariots. And your daughters he is going to take to be perfumers and cooks and bakers, and the best of your field and your vineyards and your olive trees he is going to take and give to his servants. And the 10th of your grain and your vintage he is going to take and give it to his officers and servants. And your male servants and your female servants and your beasts, young men, and your donkeys he is going to take and use it for his own work. And the 10th of your sheep he is going to take, and you are to be his servants. And you shall cry on that day because of your sovereign whom you have chosen for yourself. But Yah is not going to answer you in that day. However, the people refused to listen to the voice of Shemuel, and said, No, but let this king be over us. Then we also, like all the nations, and our king shall rule us, and go out before us and fight our battles. And Shemuel heard all the words of the people and repeated them in the hearing of Yah.
Okay, so here in Romans, we see people and Paul telling them, listen, yeah, I know, remember, these people are going through awakening. If they are going through awakening, it means they are like the Bereans, they are searching the scriptures. And when they read the scriptures, they probably come across the scriptures, which we'll go through now, that a prophecy that was given to David, that someone after the lineage of David will sit on the throne of David and rule over God's people. And the awakening is happening in the kingdom of Rome, where you've got the two legs of Nebuchadnezzar, the legs of iron. Constantinople as one and Rome as the other one. That's in that time period when the Messiah came and just after the Messiah, right? So they are under rulership of King Herod, which we'll cover now. And they are going through awakening. And they're probably asking Paul the following: why is this king, which is not after Judah, sitting on the throne and ruling over us? It says, honor the king. For you guys once were under this system, which you probably voted for and wanted, as you wanted a king appointed over you, as your forefathers prophesied. So by this, there are many interesting points when we read this. The first one is you'll see is, then all the elders of Israel, verse 4 in Samuel, then all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together. So they formed a posse, if I can put it that way, right? Gathered themselves together and came to Samuel unto Ramah and said unto him, behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not after the ways, nor now awake, now make us a king to judge us like all the other nations. Remember, God said, do not do after the ways of the nations. Worship me in my way that I have told you. Now these people are saying, well, we want a king appointed unto us, just like all the nations have a king appointed unto them. Before that, they did not have kings. They were all judges. Judges did this. They weren't anointed as kings. So this Israel is awakening, and this Samuel is getting old. They say, please, let's do to us what the other nations want. We want kings just like they have kings to rule over us. First point to note, right? According to all the works which they have, sorry man, where am I? And said unto him, behold, thou art old. Okay, appointing kings. But this thing displeased Samuel. Samuel was not happy when they said, appoint a king over us. This displeased Samuel, verse 6. When they said, give us a king and judge us. And Samuel prayed unto Yahweh. Verse 7. And Yahweh said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they have said unto you. For they have not rejected you, Samuel, but they have rejected me, Yahweh, that I should not reign over them. These people did not realize there was no need for a king. You already had a God reigning over you. Why do you want to appoint a king? Make a note. This is very important. This is what people don't understand in Scripture. Kings was never supposed to rule over Israel. But the people wanted this. Note what he's saying. They have not rejected you, Samuel, but they have rejected me, Yahweh, that I should not reign over them. How did God reign over the children of Israel? He brought up judges. They were judges and prophets, not ruled by a man. Now God is saying, well, Samuel, they spoke evil. They've not rejected you. Don't be angry, Samuel. They've not rejected you, Samuel, but they have rejected me. Realize what's happening. They rejected that God ruled over them and wanted a king appointed unto them, just like the heathen nations amongst them, which God said, do not do according to their ways, do according to my way. Make a note, because this is very important to understand where Paul is coming from. Paul
Do you
knew this. This is why Paul is saying this. Sorry?
do you have I know you probably do, but do you have a scripture in Isaiah where it says don't go after the nations and do as they do?
Isaiah 10, verse 1 through 4. You want to quickly go and read it before we carry on?
Woe to those making unrighteous inscriptions and writers who have prescribed toil to keep the needy back from right ruling and to take what is right from the poor of my people. The widows become their prey and orphans their plunder. What shall you do in the day of visitation?
No, Jeremiah 10.
Oh, I thought you said Isaiah.
Yeah, I did, but I was wrong. Sorry.
Okay, don't worry.
When you read, I can hear it, not read what it says.
Jeremiah 10. Okay. Jeremiah 10, 1 to 4.
Yes, just what, maybe 1, 2, 3 even.
Okay. Hear the words which Yah speaks to you, O house of Israel. Thus said Yah, do not learn the way of the nations, and do not be awed by the signs of heaven, and the nations are awed by them. For the laws of these people are worthless, for one cuts a tree down, and that's the Christmas tree, I see. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So do not learn the ways of the nations. You'll see in Exodus the same thing is said. It says, do not go after the nations, for I am your God. They can worship the sun, moon, and stars. That's fine. But you are my people. You worship me in the way I tell you to worship me. God ordains his love to us and tells us, you worship me in this manner. So yeah, in Samuel, the background. Remember, this is all for Romans 14. So all this background I'm giving you now, you have to understand so that you can discern what Paul is saying in Romans 13, where we are now. People are asking him concerning a king that's ruling over them. Remember this. Right. So verse 8 in Samuel. If someone can just post the scriptures every time, because people are going to keep on asking, where are you, where are you? I'm back in Samuel now, verse 8, right? According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, even unto this day, whereby they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto you. Now, therefore, hearken unto their voice, Samuel, right? How by yet protest solemnly unto them. Okay, so hearken unto their voice, Samuel, and protest unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. So Samuel is told, listen to their voice, Samuel, and show them, all right, Israel, if you do not want me, Yahweh, to rule over you, and you want to do as the heathens do, because appoint a God to us like the heathens have, I'll show you what happens when I appoint a king over you to rule over you. So now, listen to what he's saying. And Samuel told all the words, verse 10. And Samuel told all the words that Yahweh said unto the people that asked him of a king. Remember, they asked him, appoint a king of us, Samuel, you're getting old. And he said, this will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons, and he will appoint them to himself for his chariots, and to be horsemen, and same shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over the thousands, and captains over fifties. And he will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war. This king that this children wanted to rule over them, when God said, no, why do they want a king to rule over them? They have got me, Yahweh, to rule over them by my appointed prophets and judges. No, Samuel, you're getting old now, and your sons are not walking in God's ways. Why don't you, Samuel, appoint a king over us to rule over us just like the other nations are doing? We no longer want to be set apart. We no longer want to be ruled by God who we cannot observe or see. We only hear from him by people. And God said, Samuel, they have not sinned against you, but against me, for they have rejected me and my ways. But know what, Samuel? They think they are wise. I'll show them. Tell them I will appoint a king over them. And when I appoint this king over them, he will rule over them with an iron fist. But remember that I, Yahweh, have appointed that king over you. So honor him. You are always instructed to honor a king. And this king will rule over your sons and daughters and do all these things to you. So when the time comes, turn back to me. Turn back to Yahweh. You'll see how beautiful this is. But this is what Paul is speaking about in Romans 13. These people are asking Paul something very interesting. Let's just go back to Romans 13 with this understanding. Sorry, let me just open it. Romans 13. For therefore resist not the power, because you will resist the ordinance of God. Why, if there's a king and he rules over you according to Romans 13, verse 1 through 3, and this king is evil, to not resist him? Because you asked for this, Israel. You said you wanted a king. Now honor that king. He will rule over you. These people are complaining. Our sons and daughters are not ours. We're living in a Roman Empire. Herod is not the king that was prophesied to sit on the throne of David. He's not out of Judah. Why are we doing this? This is the context for Romans 14. Paul gives them an answer. It's all about fasting. You'll see why. And this is what happens. These people fall away. They start, a king is appointed because this is what they wanted after other nations, which is not sound doctrine. God appoints that king to rule over them, and they're asking Paul, yeah, why? This king is evil, and Paul is saying this is why. Because if God has appointed a king, do not stand up against him. Even though he's evil, he will rule over you, like we read in Samuel when they wanted a king over them. So, with this understanding we read in Samuel, let's go back and read verse 1 through 3 again, Emmanuel.
Okay. Let every being be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from Elohim, and the authorities that exist are appointed by Elohim. So he who opposes the authority withstand the institution of Elohim, and those who withstand shall bring judgment on themselves. For those ruling are an object of fear, not to do good works, but evil. Do you wish to not be afraid of authority? Do the good, and you shall have praise from it, for it is a servant of Elohim to you to do good.
Okay. Those who have authorities appointed over them, honor them. If you're a king appointed over you, honor him. Because if you do not honor him and he's appointed by God the Father, you are not honoring the Father. A king is always to be honored. That's why when the Messiah came and he was appointed to be king, that's why his disciples could honor the king. You are always told to honor a king. Let me give you some more background in this. We have to honor a king because a king is always appointed by God. This is what Paul is trying to tell them. Do not resist this King Herod, for he was appointed over you. And because, now note, make a note of this and realize what's happening. Because King Herod is appointed over the children and is ruling over them that was prophesied, they are now turning back. They are searching the scriptures. It's an awakening, turning back, reading the scriptures, because they don't want to be ruled and governed by this king. They want their king to come out of David, the one that sits on the throne, the Messiah. He's not there. He's ascended into heaven. So Paul is answering them concerning this. So just go to Isaiah chapter 40.
40 or 14?
40.
Okay.
Verse 22 to 23.
It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretch out the heavens like a curtain, and spreads them out like the tent to dwell in it. Who bring princes to naught shall make the rulers of the earth as emptiness.
Okay. It's him, our Father, who sits above the circle of the earth, and he makes kings or princes or rulers to honor or to nothing. If he wants to throw down a king, he does it. If he wants to appoint a king, he does. You'll see in the other scriptures what I'm saying. So when he appoints Nebuchadnezzar to be a king to rule over Israel with an iron fist, you have to honor that king. That's why Daniel tells him, you, Nebuchadnezzar, you are King of Kings and Lord of Lords, for God has appointed you. Daniel is honoring the king. He knows this. Paul knows that. But the people that Paul is speaking to, that are awakening, do not know this. They are realizing this and asking questions. Okay, so go to Psalm 75, verse 6 to 8.
For exaltation are neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the wilderness, but Elohim is the judge. He puts down one and exalts another. For a cup is in his hand of Yah, and the wine shall foam. It is filled with the mixture, and he pours it out, and the wrong of the earth drinks, draining it to the degrees.
So Yah is a judge. He exalts one and sets down one. He sets up kings and throws down kingdoms. Why? Because Israel asked him for a king. He said, I will put kings over you, Israel. Every time you are disobedient, this king is going to rule over you. And he's going to scatter your children and be very harsh so that he can oppress you and you can turn back. You're going to ask, where is this God of Moses that led the children out of Egypt? Where is he when you are oppressed? You're going to start asking those questions and turn back to him. That's why he lifts them. Because remember, the word was evil to Samuel when they said, Paul appoint a king over us. Samuel said, no, this is evil. And God said, no, Samuel, it's not evil towards you. You are not a God nor a king. It's evil against me because they want a king instead of a God. Because the king is appointed according to the nations around him. Remember they asked, appoint a king for us that resemble the nations around us. Just like they have kings, we also want a king. We want to see and touch him. Note. Okay. Go to Proverbs chapter 8, verse 14 to 16.
Counsel is mine, and sound wisdom. I am understanding. Mightiness is mine. But my sovereigns reign, and rulers make righteous inscriptions.
Okay, let me just read you. Verse 15. By me, Yahweh, kings reign, and princes decree judges. By his word, kings will reign and decree judgment. By me, princes rule, nobles, and all the righteous rulers of earth. By him it is done. It's either for good, he either raises up a king for good, like David, like all of these kings that was appointed, or for bad, like Nebuchadnezzar and all the kings appointed there. It's always got these kings and kingdoms. This is hence the gospel of the Messiah, of a kingdom. That's why he preaches this. This is something that most people miss. So, God will appoint a king for good or for bad, always, either to prosecute or to relieve. Okay? Go to Proverbs chapter 21. Note, I'm giving you the Torah, the law. All of these things are in the Torah and the law and all of those Old Testament to understand what Paul is saying in the New Testament.
21 verse.
21 verse 1 and 2.
In the sovereign's heart is as channels of waters in the hands of Yah. He turns it whatever he wishes. All a man's ways are right in his own eyes, but Yah weighs the heart.
A king's heart is in Yahweh's hand like the water courses. He turns it whatever he desires. Remember Pharaoh and the bondage of the children of Israel in Egypt? He hardened Pharaoh's heart to not let them go so that his glory can be shown. Pharaoh didn't harden his heart on his own. He wasn't stiff-necked on his own. God hardened his heart. Pharaoh was a king. And he said, he told Moses, don't worry, I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that you can see my glory. And if he did not harden Pharaoh's heart, you would not see the wonders, signs, and miracles of the 10 plagues, of the Red Sea opening and devouring them. This is what is spoken about. God, Yahweh, he raises up kings and he throws down kings. He raises up kingdoms and throws down kingdoms. Hence his son Yeshua is given a kingdom. He will raise up his son Yeshua to sit on this throne. This is what it's speaking about. Paul is trying to delay this to people who do not know the law, who are awakening. People that are awake in scripture or awakening do not know the Torah. They are instructed in the Torah. It's a sanctification process. He's trying to delay this knowledge to them that we read in Romans 13 because it's all about an awakening. And always when awakening happens, you search the scriptures and you realize we have to do X, Y, and Z. For example, even people today. Oh, I realize I should not eat pork. Okay, stop eating pork. Oh, but it's not only pork, it's also shellfish. Stop eating that. Doesn't all happen in one day. This is what Paul is saying. Because we are instructed in the law, we can now decipher what Paul is saying without even having the letter which is answering them with. Okay? So, just another one, just to show you that the Messiah knew this truth. Go to John chapter 19. This is now where his prosecution happens in the courts. John chapter 19, verse 9 through 12.
And went back to the place and asked Yeshua, where are you from? But Yahushua gave him no answer. Then Pilate said to him, do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I possess authority to impale you, and I possess authority to release you? Yeshua answered, You would possess no authority against me if he were not given you from above. Because of this, he who delivered me to you is greater, he has greater sin. For then on Pilate was seeking to release him, but the Jews shouted, saying, If you release this one, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king does not speak against Caesar.
Note what the Messiah is saying here. Messiah knows this law, for the Messiah is this law that we read about, that God will set up kings and give them authority and throw down kings and take away their authority. Yeshua answered, You would have no power against me, Yeshua, unless it was given to you from above. That's the of God. So when Paul is speaking in Romans, where we are now, chapter 13, verse 1 and 3, where he's speaking now, the power to rule over God's children is given to that King Herod to rule over them, because God appoints kings and throws down kings. This is what Paul is trying to say. So, just last one. Just read Isaiah. Just read Isaiah chapter 40, verse 23. Also read verse 24. Then we can carry on.
Isaiah 14?
40.
Okay. 1 to 3. And then you said verse 24. Comfort,
23 to 24.
Oh, 23, sorry. 23. Who bring princes to naught shall make the rulers of the earth as emptiness. Hardly have they been planted, hardly have they been sown, hardly has their stalk taken root in the earth, when he shall blow on them, and they wither, and their wither wind take them away like stubble.
So, these kingdoms that God raises up, if people become obedient, if you go read that whole Isaiah, God will blow. Remember the winds that will come?
Yeah.
Those kingdoms will fall. Yeah, he's speaking about the last kingdom to ever exist, the 10th kingdom of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. He's speaking about that kingdom. It's called the Mystery Babylon. Different teaching. I just don't want to go into it. But I want to show you that God raises up kings and kingdoms. So with this understanding, Emmanuel, just go back to Romans. So I'll read it. Let every soul be subject unto the higher power. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained by God. So if there's an evil king ruling over you in the country where you live, it's been ordained. So prosecution can come so that you can turn back to your first love. He will prosecute you into your birth pain so you can turn back to your first love. Birth pains, people that know what I'm speaking about when I say that. Whosoever therefore resists the power, this king that God has appointed, resists the ordinances of God. Paul is making it clear. Why is Paul saying this? Well, now we know why. Because Paul is instructed in the law. Paul is saying, do you not know, brothers, that I speak to those who know the law? Does Paul know the law when he makes this statement? Of course he does. I've just referenced you multiple scriptures about kings and kingdoms and how God will set them up and where this comes from. But remember, the people he's speaking to do not know this. He's just giving them an understanding of the knowledge that he has. He's a very wise person, Paul. But if those do not know the law, will twist his letters to their own destruction, the way of lawlessness. Remember? So here it says, whosoever therefore resists the power, resists the ordinances of God, because a king is ordained by God for good or evil. Right? And they that resist shall receive to themselves condemnation or judgment. If you do not for 1 second, children of Israel, listen to me carefully, my brothers and sisters. Do you not for 1 second think, for 1 second, that you can resist the powers that are set above you today, if it was ordained by God? Because now you are doing this. You arm wrestling against your Most High. Can you win? But what does it say? What do people say? Most people. No, we will get out of the system and go do it our own way. No, you won't. You're crazy. Isn't that insanity? When people say this, having no clue how it works. Accepting God's way of creation is being at peace with the world. Accepting the king that rules over you and that you must always honor the king that rules over you is accepting his creation. People get angry. And I know I'm going on a rant. I just want people to understand. You get angry in your country where you are because Joe Biden is making a mess and transgenders. But you've allowed it. Didn't the leaven come in because you said you go do your own thing, leave us alone? You've allowed that leaven to come in. Now the judgment will come and you'll be prosecuted. And because you know the truth, you'll hate this and you'll turn back to God, saying, Father, please show us your ways. Please, please. And God will look down out of heaven, will cover this. And he will heal your land where you stay. A king is appointed for evil to rule over you. Like we read, Paul is quoting the Torah and the prophets. Honor that king, for God has ordained him. For if you do not honor the king, you do not honor God who appointed him as king. Hence, this is why the Messiah can also be honored. For if you do not honor the Messiah as a king, you do not honor God who has appointed him as a king. This is what Paul is getting through to their minds, because they are stiff-necked hard people. Remember, they are awakening. He's speaking to Gentiles who are coming through an awakening. And when awakening happening, fasting happenings. This is where we'll go next. I hope you get what I'm saying so far, Emmanuel.
Yeah, so far I'm following. Just taking notes here.
So now just more to the end of Romans 13 before we go to Romans 14. Romans 13, verse 8 through 10.
Owe no one any matter except to love one another, for he who loves another has filled the Torah. For this, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there's any other command, it is summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no evil to a neighbor, therefore love is completion of the law.
Or fulfilling of the law, right? There's a reason I'm here. You remember that Yeshua is born under the rulership or the kingship of King Herod. Right? Am I saying it right? Harold in Afrikaans. How do I say it in English? King Herod?
Are you talking about Herodes?
The King Herod. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. King
Yeah.
Herod. King Herod. King Herod. The Messiah is born in this kingdom of King Herod, which in the statue of Nebuchadnezzar is the two iron legs, the Roman Empire. Constantinople as one and Rome as the other. In this kingdom, the Messiah is born. And in this kingdom, when the Messiah is born, King Herod is king over the land. King Herod rules over the people. For the Messiah came into the world to save the lost sheep. They are scattered. He needs to bring them to a redemption, his gospel of a kingdom, right? He, King Herod, sits on the throne of King David, and he is an Edomite. A king over Israel, he sits on the throne of King David, ruling over the children of Israel, but he's an Edomite. He's not out of Judah, which was prophesied. Now, these people are asking Paul about this King Herod that is ruling over them. And he says, no, honor that king, for God has appointed him. If you do not honor that king, you might go against the ordinance of God, because if God appointed him, who are you to challenge God and why God appointed him? It's because King Herod is ruling over you and you are being treated badly that you are now repenting. So honor that king, for God appointed him for you to do so. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. King Herod is an Edomite. He's not part of the covenant. Remember, they are searching the scriptures like the noble Bereans. Herod is not part of the covenant made to King David when King David was told, I will forever have a king to sit on your throne if you are obedient to me. And this king eventually comes, Yeshua the Messiah, to sit on the throne. But he only sits on the throne when he comes down on Mount Sinai. Then the kingdom is established. Right? So we read something earlier. He says them, no man anything, but love one another. And then he quotes the Torah. Paul is quoting the Torah. So just for those, just Matthew 5 verse 17. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill. If you're saying that fulfill means taken away, Romans 13 verse 8 to 10 is contrary. You have to apply the same. Just for interest's sake, just so you guys go there. So now, Romans, carry on in Romans chapter 13, verse 11 through 14.
Love does no evil to the neighbor, therefore love is completion of the Torah. And do this: knowing the time that is already the hour for us to wake up from sleep. For now our deliverance is nearer than we did believe. The night is far advanced, the day has come near, so let us put off the works of darkness and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk becomingly as in the day, not in the wild parties and drunkenness, not in living together in indecency, not in fighting and envy, but put on the Master Yeshua, Messiah, and make no provision of the lust of the flesh.
Okay, note what he's saying here. This is the context for the whole of Romans 14. Everything that we went through now. I'm showing you what Paul is saying because we don't have the letters that Paul was responding to, right? So, yeah, and that, remember, the previous one we read is love one another, for love is fulfilling the law. Do not kill, do not steal. Do not do after the manners that these kingdoms where you're living in with this king appointed after you do that. Do what is right. Do the Torah. Even though you're living in that kingdom, still do righteousness. Don't do after their ways. And then it says in verse 11, it says, and that knowing at this time, that know that it is high time to awake out of your sleep. Paul is telling them, knowing that this time is here, awaken out of your sleep. People that are waking up. Remember, I told you, it's always about awakening. Awake out of your sleep. Do not do according to these kings and princes that are appointed of you. Awake out of your sleep. Do the Torah. Right? For now is our salvation nearer than when we believe. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness of these kingdoms that they are living in, kings that are appointed over them and their rules and judgment. And let us put on the armor of light. Torah. Right? Let us walk honestly in the day, not in routing of drunkenness or nor chambering and wantingness, nor in strife and envying, but put on Yeshua the Messiah and make not provision for the flesh to fulfill the lusts thereof. Put on the Messiah, walk as he walks. So Paul is telling them, you guys, this is awakening, the time is at hand. Wake up, Gentiles. Do no longer walk after the ways of these kings that have been appointed over you, but still do the Torah. Do not kill, do not steal, do not do all these things, drunkenness, orgies. Don't do after the ways they are doing. Set yourselves apart. Awakening happens so that the gospel of the kingdom, the awakening, the heart circumcision can happen, so that the Messiah can come, which was prophesied to sit and rule over them, because they have a ruler, King Herod, over them, which was not the one who was prophesied to rule over them. So Paul is giving them the gospel of the kingdom here. Paul is telling them, awake, do these things of righteousness, the gospel of the kingdom, a heart circumcision. The kingdom is within, first a heart circumcision. Then you do these good works, so the gospel of the kingdom is now within, so that you can inherit the promised land, promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And you have one ruler, one prince, one king to sit on that chair, Yeshua the Messiah, who will come down and judge and rule over all nations, him and the 144. So Paul, is here telling them, awaken, do these things, so that you can get out of this king who's ruling over you, but you must still honor the king, remember? But then you can get out of him only when you become obedient. So this is every word I'm speaking, and I'll make a note. Because you're going to say, I'm going to give you scripture for everything, my friends. And I hope you understand this. And I hope it brings you to life. Because most people will argue, not knowing they're arguing against the word of God. This is scriptures, it's not an opinion. Okay, so okay. With everything we read so far in the context of Romans 13, it's always speaking about awakening. You see Paul telling them that a king is ruling over you, and this time it's King Herod. And the people are complaining about this king. And he says, do not stand up against this king, you foolish man. Don't think you can stand up against the king if God has appointed that king. There's a reason he appointed it over you. It's so that you are awakening like you are awakening now, so that the Messiah can return and judge and rule and bring you into the promised land. They are realizing that this King Herod is an Edomite. He's not out of Judah. He's not the one to prophesy. And they ask Paul, how is he ruling over us? We're going to overthrow him. Paul says, no. He is the reason that you are awakening now. I am the reason, Paul, Paul, am the reason I'm speaking to you now to give you the gospel of the kingdom. For Paul spoke the gospel of the kingdom just as the Messiah. Paul didn't give any other gospel. It was always the gospel of the kingdom. This is proof of this, right? So always remember that the New Testament, when this happened, did not exist. That's why we're always going to Torah to see the background, where they're coming from and what is being said, right? So when there's an awakening, we see here Paul is speaking to people that are going through an awakening. Just like you people are going through awakening now in these days. Mine is from 2009, but most is from 2017 up to today. There's a big awakening. And when this awakening happens, certain things happen. So if the New Testament did not exist in Paul's time, and these people are asking Paul questions, where did they go for the answers? Emmanuel?
If they needed answers and they couldn't go to Paul?
If the New Testament did not exist when Paul is speaking to these people face to face, where did they go to test what Paul is saying or to go seek the answers of what Paul is saying?
In the prophets and the Torah.
Hallelujah. Okay, so we have to go to the prophets and the Torah to see what happens when there's an awakening happening. And now you're going to see how beautiful this becomes. Go to Isaiah 58.
So this is still under 13 or under 14?
This is now the precursor for 14. And then we're going to read a couple of prophets, and then we're going to go read 14, and you're going to say, it's like a puzzle that fits in place. It's
Okay,
never
hold
been
on.
about food, it's about fasting. It's awakening.
Hold on.
You're going to read Isaiah, the whole Isaiah 58 at this, actually, yeah, all the way through 14. So I think it's the whole of Isaiah 58. Let me just, while you are reading, I'm going to grab something to drink, and then when I come back, we'll read some highlights in it. And
Okay.
make note, because it's going to answer Romans 14.
Okay. Give me a second, guys. You said Isaiah 58. Isaiah 58, 1, on the whole chapter. All right. Cry aloud, do not spare. Lift up your voice like a shofar, declare to my people their transgression and the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me day by day and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the right ruling of their Elohim. They ask for me right ruling of righteousness. They delight in drawing near to Elohim. They say, why have we fasted and have not seen? Why have we afflicted our beings, and you look not, and you took no note? Look in that day of your fasting and find pleasure, and drive on all your labors. Look, you fast for strife and contention, and you take strike with the fist of wrongness. You do not fast as you do this day, to make your voice heard on high. It is a fast that I have chosen, a day of a man to afflict his being. Let me read that. Is it the fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his being? Is it to bow down his head like a bulrush, and to spread out sackcloth and ashes? Do you call this a fast and an acceptable day to Yah? It is not the fast that I have chosen, to loosen the tight cords of wrongness, to undo the bands of the yoke, to exempt the oppressed, and to break off every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and that you bring to your house the poor who are cast out, when you see the naked, and cover him, and do not hide yourself from your own flesh? Then your light would break forth like the morning, your healing spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you, and the esteem of Yah would be your rear guard. Then, when you call, Yah would answer. When you cry, he would say, here I am. If you take away the yoke from the midst, the pointing of the finger and the speaking of unrighteousness. If you extend your being to hunger and satisfy the afflicted being, then your light shall dawn in the darkness, and your darkness be as noon. Then Yah would guide you continually and satisfy your being in drought, and strengthen your bone, and you shall be like the watered garden, and like a spring of water whose water does not fail. And those from among you shall build the old waste places, and you shall raise up the foundation of many generations. And you would be called the repairer of the breach, and the restorer of the street to dwell in. If you do turn back your foot from Shabbat, from doing your pleasure on my set-apart day, and you shall call the Shabbat a delight, this is a set-apart day of Yisrael, set-apart day of Yah, esteemed, and shall esteem it, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasures, nor speaking your own words. Then you shall delight yourself in Yah, and I shall cause you to ride on the heights of the earth, and feed you with the inheritance of Jacob, your father, for the mouth of Yah has spoken.
Are you done, brother?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember the context when we began. I gave you a context that Paul is receiving a letter from someone, and this letter is full of questions, and Paul's response is what we have in Scripture. We don't have the letter asking the questions, right? So now I want you to realize when there's an awakening that's happening, people are searching the Scriptures like the Bereans. Apply this to yourself. When you were awakened, you asked yourself, how should I keep the Sabbath? How should I fast? What does fasting entail? Only examples of that is in the Old Testament. So this is where they are going. And they're reading what you've just read now and asking Paul's questions concerning this. Okay? Make a note because you'll see how it answers Romans 14 very beautifully. Word for word, actually. So, verse 1. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up the voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins. Okay? What are the apostles doing? What is the commission? Go and make disciples of all nations. Go tell them their transgression. Show them their righteous way. Tell them why they were divorced. Tell them how they've come back into the covenant via the Messiah. Tell them their transgression. Blow the trumpet. What we are doing, right? Verse 3. That's the context, right? So they are now reading what we are reading. This is awakening. When someone goes through awakening, they go search the scriptures because it says test everything to see who their Messiah is. What did he prophesy? Did he do it? This is what we are doing now. Okay, verse 3, where we are now. Wherefore have we fasted, say they, and thou seest not? Wherefore have we afflicted our soul, and thou take no knowledge of it? Behold, in that day of your fast you find pleasure. Do not find your own pleasure when you are fasting. First point, make a note. It's in Romans 14. And exact all your labors. Do not take your pleasure and do your labor when you are fasting. These people are in Romans 14 going through a fast. And
What does
Paul
that
is
mean?
answering concerning questions that we are reading now.
What does it mean when it says, look in that day of your fasting, you find pleasure? I understand that, but it says labors. What is that labor? What does that look like?
When you are fasting in a certain fast, depending on what your fast is, because you'll see the context now says you fast in this manner and that manner. That's not what fasting is about. Your labor in fasting, if you make a commitment in fasting and you're not going to do a certain thing, don't do it. Don't let people know that you are fasting. Don't be seen by it.
Yeah,
If
don't
you
be
say, well, I'm going to be fasting and I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to be praying for 3 days. If you've made that commitment and that promise, that covenant with God that you've locked, make sure to hold it. Do not think that if you said you're going to be just dedicated to God, now go and work again. If you made that commitment, keep it. Right?
Okay.
Now, verse 4, behold, you fast for strife and debate and to smite with the fist of wickedness. You shall not fast as you do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Why are people fasting? For debate. What happens in Romans 14? What is Paul saying? Do not be a stumbling block. What is he saying? They're fasting, and these people are debating on how to fast. Saying, no, you can't. Listen, what? You can't eat meat when you're fasting. For the only example of fasting we have was vegetables, Daniel. That's fasting for debate. You can fast in anything. You can fast by saying, I'm not watching TV for a year. You can fast by saying, I'm not eating meat for a month. You can fast by saying, I'm not eating vegetables for a month. The fast is a covenant you lock between you and your Father. You can fast by not drinking water or wine or any drink. It's not on what you are eating, but what you are committing to. That fast must afflict you. For example, if you're addicted to alcohol, right? You're going to fast on alcohol. You're going to afflict yourself so you can get over it and get answers and questions. Everyone that goes through awakening, remember I just showed you Romans 13 is about awakening. People that are awakening. Romans 13 and 14 is the same story. It's not a different chapter or a different episode. It's the precursor to Romans 14. Awakening happens. When this awakening happens, people search the scriptures. At that time, they did not have the New Testament. So they went to the Old Testament, and it's all about fasting. And this is what I'm trying to show you. So I'm going to go to the scriptures about fasting in the Old Testament, and you see it play into Romans 14. And realize it's never been about clean and unclean foods. It's about foods and drink, what you're allowed to eat and when. Do not be a stumbling block for your brother. If he wants to fast the way he fasts, do you not strive and argue with him? Like we are reading here. Now this is the questions that is written to Paul, and this is why Paul is giving the answer in Romans 14. Example, behold, you fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Why are they fasting? What happens in Romans 14? We'll read it now. They become a stumbling block for their brother, saying, no. You have to eat vegetables, and this one has to eat meat. This is the questions they are asking Paul. Okay? With a fist, shall not fast as you do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. Verse 5. Is it such a fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Is it to bow down the head as a bulrush? I don't know what that means. And to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Wilt thou call this a fast and an acceptable day of Yahweh? He's asking, will you call this a fast? A fast that's about strife and debate? Remember, people are searching the scriptures in the New Testament do not exist. I'm reading to you where they probably went and asked Paul questions about. Is it not the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? What did we read earlier in Romans 13? Under what rulership were they? King Herod. And Paul told them what? Paul told them, listen, do not stand up against this king, for he is an evil king, but he was appointed by God. If you stand up against him, you stand up against God, because he's appointed by God's authority. Right? And they are saying what to Paul? They're asking the question, why is this king here? And Paul is saying, don't stand up against this king. You must do something if you want to go free from this. You must go through a fast. And this fast is the answer to this, what we are reading now. Listen carefully. Is not the fast that I have chosen, verse 6, loose the bands of the wickedness, the king that is wicked that rules over them, to undo the heavy burdens, the yokes of the kings that they've put the children on, and to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke. These people were living in the Roman Empire under the yoke of that king, and they are feeling the burden of the yoke because there's awakening. And because there's awakening, a fast needs to be called. And this is where Romans 13 is speaking about, going into Romans 14, which is now the fast that's being called, right? Verse 8. Then shall the light break forth as the morning, thy health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go forth from thee. The glory of Yah shall be thy reward. Then shalt thou call and Yahweh shall answer. Only then shall he call and answer. Who will they call? Bring that Messiah, gospel of the kingdom. Then you will call, and he will come. The gospel of the kingdom, he will send his Messiah. They take note of that. Then shall they call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and they shall say, Here I am. If thou take away from the midst of thee thy yoke, that putting forth of the finger, and speaking vanity. Right? Romans 13. These people is in oppression under a king, King Herod, who's oppressing them, which is not the one that's appointed to sit on the throne. He was never, he's not out of Judah. They want the Messiah. Paul says, do not stand up against this king. Honor the king, for he is appointed by God. But if you want to come free from this rope, here's the gospel of the kingdom. Repent, fast, do all these things, but fast according to what the scriptures say. Fasting is not in the New Testament. The examples are in the Old Testament. Remember, they are searching the scriptures like the noble Bereans to find out why. Everyone here today that are in truth, this truth that I'm speaking about, that the law is not done away with, all of this, they have gone through this. They are busy with this, probably asking, how should I fast? Why should I fast? What does it mean to fast? How should I keep the Sabbath? This is an awakening, right? Fasting always comes with awakening. I'll give you examples as we carry on. Verse 13. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of Yahweh, honorable, and shall honor him, not doing thy own ways, nor finding thy own pleasures, nor speaking thy own words, then shall thou delight thyself in Yahweh. And I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob, the promised land, thy father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. What is the heritage of Jacob? The land I promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These people in Romans are awakening, and they are under the heritage of Herod in the Roman Empire, saying, no, we don't want to be in this empire. Let's overthrow the king. Paul says, no, that king was appointed. This is why you are awakening. Rather fast, do the commandments, keep the law. Oh man, know anything but love one another. This is what he's saying in Romans 13. By this is love. Do not kill, do not steal. He's quoting the 10 commandments. He's telling them to do that. Then only God will hear and heal the land. Right? So now, this verse 13 to 14 becomes very crucial in Romans 14. Do not despise one day over another, because they are reading this, what we are reading now. These are the questions that Paul are answering. The question there is, should we fast on the Sabbath only? No, any day. One chooses to fast on the Sabbath and the other one chooses to fast on a different day. It doesn't mean because it says honor the Sabbath, it means that's the day you must fast on. Fast, keep the laws, and honor the Sabbath. These people are thinking that this is saying that you must only fast on the Sabbath, which is not true. Make a note of verse 13 and 14 when we go to Romans. Just make a note, Emmanuel. You'll see why it's so important. So, here we read, so these noble Bereans and these Roman letters that are writing are reading this, and they're asking Paul the question, right? And it says here, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, because just above it's speaking about fasting and becoming obedient, right? If thou turn away thy foot from, if thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasures on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, then the holy day of the Lord honorable, and shalt honor him, not doing thy own ways. Not saying the Sabbath is when you want it to be. That's what Romans is speaking about. But this verse is loosed from the fast. The fast is any day you choose. One chooses one day as esteemed above another. Some of them can fast on the Sabbath, but it doesn't mean you have to. You can fast on any day. Okay? With this in mind, let's quickly go read Romans 14, and then we carry on through the prophets to answer, right? Everything we've read now, all the understanding, I hope you remember, because it's going to answer many questions in Romans 14. So, brother, just read fast the whole, no, not all, let's break it down. Otherwise, we're going to read the whole thing and come back, or read the whole thing, You'll see as you read, you're going to start connecting dots, and then we'll come back and break it down. Read the whole Romans 14.
Okay. And receive him who is weak in the faith, not criticizing his thoughts. One indeed believes to eat all food, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. He that eats, let him not despise him, he who does not eat. And he that does not eat, let him not judge him who eats. For Elohim received him. Who are you to judge another's servants? To his own master he stands or falls. But he shall be made to stand, for Elohim is able to make him stand. One indeed judges one day above another, another judges every day alike. Let each one be completely persuaded in his own mind. He who minds the day minds it to Yah. He who minds not the day to Yah, he does not mind it. He who eats, eats to Yah. For he gives Elohim thanks, and he who does not eat to Yah, he does not eat and gives Elohim thanks. For not one of us lives to himself, For not one of us lives to himself, and not one of us dies to himself. For both if we live unto the master, and if we die unto the master. Therefore, whether we live or die, we are the master's. For unto this Messiah died and rose and lived again, to rule both the dead and the living. But why do you judge your brother, or why do you despise your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Messiah. For it has been written, As I live, says Yah, every knee shall bow down to me, and every tongue shall confess to Elohim. Each one of us, therefore, shall give an account for himself to Elohim. Therefore let us not judge one another any longer, but rather judge this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in our brother's way. I know and I'm persuaded in Master Yeshua that none at all is common of itself, but to him who regards whatever to be common, it is common. And if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking in love. Do not by your food ruin the one whom Messiah died. Do not even then allow good to be spoken of as evil. For the reign of heaven is not eating and drinking, but righteousness and peace and joy in the set-apart spirit. For he who is serving Messiah in these matters is well-pleasing to Elohim and approved by men. So then let us pursue the matters of peace and the matters of building up one another. Do not destroy the work of Elohim for the sake of food. All indeed are clean, but evil to that man who eats so as to cause stumbling. It is good not to eat meat or drink wine, nor to do whatever by which your brothers stumble. Do you have faith? Have it for yourself before Elohim. Blessed is he who does not condemn himself in what he approves. But he who doubts, if he doubts and condemned, because it is not of faith, and all that is not in faith is sin.
Taylor, up here now. I just want to read.
There's I guess a couple things I noticed, but it's a bit different. But when I was telling people a couple days ago, I was reading this chapter just as it is, and I read the chapter before also, and I'm like, when he told me that you'll read chapter 13, a couple chapters before, I'm like, but what does chapter 13 have to do anything with chapter 14? Because it talks about having rulers, and like I read Romans, so I know what it was talking about. Like, how does chapter 13 have to do with 14? But there's some of the things that he mentioned that makes a little bit more sense now.
Are you starting to understand, Manuel?
Just a bit. I'm not fully there, but I do see
Well,
kind
we
of.
still got a while to go, but you'll fully understand when I'm done, and probably listen to this a couple of times after we're done. But when I speak things, normally people don't understand. It's only after 2 or 3 times of hearing it that it starts clicking and snapping what's happening. So, to always remember, the New Testament was not written. So when they are searching the scriptures and asking Paul questions, they're asking out of the mindset of the Torah and the prophets. So Paul is answering according to the Torah and the prophets. Okay? So I'm quickly going to just read some highlights here. I think there are 4 highlights. Mark them. As we carry on, you'll see how it gets answered. Mark these highlights. Mark verse 2 and verse 3. I'm quickly going to read it. Make that highlight number 1. Right? For one believes that he may eat all things if you fast. You can believe you can eat anything when you are fast. You can stop drinking. You can eat vegetables or not. One believes all things, that he may eat all things. Another who is weak, remember those who are arguing what you should eat. This is what they are asking for. Eats herbs or vegetables. Let not him that eats despises him that eats not. And let not him which eats not judge him that eats, for God has received him. It's an awakening, it's sanctification. These people are in awakening. They're asking, how should we fast, Paul? For this king is ruling over us. We want the awakening. We want the Messiah to come sit on the throne of David. Fast, my people. How? Let's go to the prophets. Let's see what they say. And they're reading. Okay, like we read now. Do not fast by arguing with your brother. Do not tell him, listen, if you fast, you're not allowed to eat meat. Or if you fast, you're not allowed to eat vegetables. For one who is weak in faith, who does not know yet that the fast is not about what you eat or drink. Fast is your own commitment. It's your own desire to God. Fast in anything. Fast in social media if you want to. If you're a smoker, stop smoking for a week. If you're a drug addict, stop using drugs. If you're alcoholic, stop drinking alcohol. This is what it's talking about. Point number 1 is Romans 14, verse 2 and 3. Make a note, because this is going to be answered as we carry on. Point number 2 in Romans 14 is verse 5 through 6. Quickly going to read it. One man esteems one day above the other. Another esteems every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. Remember, we just read, keep my Sabbath holy, keep it to the light. If one man says he's going to fast on the Sabbath, he will esteem the Sabbath. Fast on the Sabbath, it's good. If another man says, no, I'm going to rest on the Sabbath and read scripture, I'll fast on a Wednesday. He esteems the Wednesday for the fast. There's no certain day appointed for fasting. You choose, according to your faith, how you fast, when you fast, and what you're going to give up. This is what Paul is telling them. Because they are asking questions to what they are reading in the Torah, because the New Testament did not exist. Hope you're following. That's point number 2 in Romans 14. These points are going to be answered. Point number 3 in Romans 14 is verse 14. These are the keys to unlocking. I'm giving you the keys to unlocking what it's speaking about. Because remember, Paul, that we don't have the letter written to Paul. We only have the letter Paul replied to. Okay. Verse 14. I know and am persuaded by the Master Yeshua that there is nothing unclean of itself. He's persuaded by the Master Yeshua that there is nothing unclean of itself. Nothing can be unclean that God has ordained to be clean. If God said pork is unclean, it will always be unclean, for pork was not ordained to be clean. So he's persuaded by the Messiah. Nothing can be unclean when you are fasting. No meat, vegetables, no drink. Do not think because Daniel ate vegetables, you must now also eat vegetables, because if you eat meat, it will make you unclean in your fast. No. No. Fast what you believe is true, how you understand it. But do not think that now all of a sudden it's speaking about pork that's clean. That's not the context that is spoken of here. The point number 3, I know and am persuaded by the Lord Yeshua that there is nothing unclean out of itself, but to him that it esteems anything to be unclean, to him it is unclean. So if you, according to the faith you have, remember what we read in verse 1, according to the faith you have, think that when you are fasting, that meat should not be fasted because Daniel only ate vegetables, then that meat will be unclean for you. Don't fast. Don't eat meat when you are fasting. It's according to your conviction. Not about speaking about unclean food, speaking about food when you are eating food in a certain fast, because they are using the prophets to proclaim what a fast is. You'll see it now when we go to the Daniel fast, very, very clearly. That's point number 3 that we must answer, right? Point number 4 is verse 20 and 21, where it says, for meat destroy not the work of God. All things indeed are pure, but it is evil for that man who eats with offense. Meat, for meat, destroy the work of God. All things indeed are pure. What is pure? All foods are clean. What is food? According to scripture. If we say all foods are clean, what was ordained for us as food? Leviticus 11 says, this shall be food for you, Israel. And he mentions the food. And he says, this will not be food for you, Israel. And he mentions the list. So when he's saying, for meat destroys not the work of God, do not think that you're fasting and you eat meat, that work is destroyed. You fast on your conviction, according to your faith. If you have little faith, you'll probably not eat meat. You'll do like Daniel did and eat vegetables, because that is your only example. But we just read a fast in Isaiah. We just read a fast is according to the man and what you have dedicated to God to fast on. Okay. But it is evil that a man who eats with offense. So if you think that you should not eat meat when you are fasting, that will convict you. It's evil for you. Then don't do it. But it's got nothing to do with clean and unclean animals. Make a note. Nothing at all. Verse 21. It is good neither to eat flesh, nor to drink wine, nor anything whereby the brother stumbles, or is offended, or is made weak. What wine, if it's speaking about unclean animals, what wine or drink in scripture is unclean? Is there a drink in scripture that is unclean for you? If there is, name it. The only thing that you can drink that is unclean is blood. But this is not talking about blood.
That's what I was about to say.
Yes, but this is not talking about blood. It's talking about drink. It's talking about the food that God has before ordained. When you fast and God said, beef is clean, you can eat beef, and you're fasting and you're saying, no, but I don't want to eat beef when I'm fasting because Daniel ate vegetables. That's your only example. This is the only example they have because it's an awakening, right? Then you don't eat meat, then you only eat vegetables. But it's applying the same thing in drink. If you think that when you're fasting you should not drink water, then don't. A soda or Coke or beer or wine, then don't. Your fast is what you choose. It's your awakening because you work out your salvation with fear, your own fear and trembling. Your own salvation you work out with fear and trembling. My salvation has got nothing to do with my brother Emmanuel here. For my stumbling blocks are a 90-degree opposite turn of his stumbling blocks. We don't have the same stumbling block. Each man is convicted of his own sin. Righteousness is required here. So these are 4 points in Romans 14 that you must write down and we must make a note of. Because now we're going to go read scripture and see why they asked the questions. Because remember, the New Testament did not exist. They only had, if we are in awakening today and we want to know how to fast, we go read in the Old Testament how to fast. We go read what Nehemiah did. We go read what Daniel did. We go read all these things because every time there's an awakening, a fast is called. Paul is telling them, this king Herod is ruling over you. Do not stand up against him, rather call a fast. But if you fast, now they're asking him, Paul, but do we fast on the Sabbath? No, one esteems the next day over the other, like we read in the prophets when fasting. Either you can fast on the Sabbath or a whole week, depending on you. Remember we read earlier, do not withhold yourself from your wife too longly when you are fasting. Be celibate. That is true. Okay? Verse 23. And he that doubts is damned if he eat. And he that doubts is damned if he eats, because he eats not with faith. For whatsoever is not of faith is sin. What's it saying here about fasting? When you are fasting and you're not sure how to fast, and you say, okay, for example, the Daniel fast only fasted on vegetables. And I'm telling you, Jason here is telling you, you can fast on anything. You can also eat meat while you're fasting, depending on what you are fasting on. Depending on the covenant you locked with God when you are fasting. And if you then say, okay, I'm gonna have a certain fast, but I'm still gonna eat meat. And you eat that with offense, and you realize, I think I should have done it with vegetables only. Now I'm eating meat. That is sin unto you. You've broken your commitment on fast. You are wrong there, because the fast is not about food. It's not about drink. It's about your affliction. Remember, it says rent your hearts and not your garments. Don't go to your brother and say, listen, Emmanuel, if you want to fast, Emmanuel, first point, be celibate. Make sure that you do that because it works very well. But second point is, Emmanuel, do not eat meat. Only vegetables like Daniel, because that's our only example. When Isaiah told us, no, your fast is your commitment to God. Now, Emmanuel says, no, I'm going to eat meat. Now I'm strifing and arguing with him. No, that's not what Scripture says. That's not what the fast is about, like we read earlier in Isaiah. Fasting is not about strife. Do not be a stumbling block to your brother. He can fast on his conviction. That's what this is speaking about. It's got nothing to do with clean and unclean animals. To prove it, we just need to go on to Romans chapter 15, and then I'm going to give you scriptures to break this down a bit more. Romans 15, just read verse 1 through 4.
For we who are strong ought to bear with a failing of the weak, and do not please ourselves. Let each one of us please his neighbor for his good, to build him up. For even the Messiah did not please himself, but as it has been written, the reproach of those who reproach you have fell upon me. For whatever was written before was written for an instruction, that through endurance and encouragement of the scripture we might have expectation. And Elohim of endurance and encouragement give you to be of the same mind toward one another, according to the Messiah.
Okay, so now verse 15 just carries on from verse 14. So we read a bit on verse Romans 13, carries on into 14, 14 carries on into 15. It's one letter, people. It's just got chapters in between. That's the only difference. But note now what he is saying, because this is the clue to unlock Romans 14 as we are busy doing. Verse 4, for whosoever things were written over time were written for your learning. Paul is saying, your learning, you Romans, Gentiles. Everything that was written for you. What was written? The New Testament was not written. Torah and the prophets is written for your learning. So where are they learning from? The prophets. Fasting is in the prophets. This is where they are going. This is why Paul is answering the way he's doing. Right? That we taught patience and comfort of the scriptures, in the scriptures might have hope. Let me read it again. For whatsoever things were written over time were written for your learning, that we taught patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. What hope are they looking for? What was Romans 13 about, Emmanuel? What hope are they looking for?
Pardon me?
In Romans 13, there was a discussion with Paul. These people were asking Paul about certain things. What hope are these people hoping for?
For a king.
What king?
Yeshua.
Hallelujah. And what king ruled over them?
This guy named with Herods? I don't know how to say it properly.
Herod ruled over them. They are asking, we are afflicted, Paul. How do we get out of this empire? Do we overthrow this king? Paul responds. He says, no, a king is appointed by God for good or evil. If you go up against this king who was appointed by God, you are going up against God's ordained ordinance for this king to rule over you. So now he says, all the scriptures are written for you so that you can have a hope on what? Of a gospel, of a kingdom, a hope of to be set free. And how do you do that? What happening? Remember I said to you in Romans 13, this is all about awakening. And when awakening happens, it becomes beautiful. You'll see why. So Romans 15 verse 1 through 4 tells us especially to understand 14. Everything in the scriptures was written for us for hope. So where are they going? To the Old Testament. To do what? To figure out how to fast. This is why Paul is given the account in Romans 14 about fasting. Telling them, do not. One can fast on vegetables, meat. Do not be a stumbling block for your brother. Each one can fast according to his own conviction. That's what fasting is about. It's not about food at all. It's not about drink at all. It's about fasting. This is the guideline of Paul. It says if you fast in anything. If you don't want to fast about food and drink, fast on media. Fast on being silent. Fast on working on anything. like we read in the prophets earlier, right? So every year in Romans 15, which is just carried on from verse 14, verse 1 through 4, but especially 4, it says everything was written for our learning and hope. The New Testament was not written when they asked these questions. The Old Testament. So everything that was written for our learning and hope. These people are learning how to fast because there's an awakening. They never fasted before because they did not belong to God. They were divorced. They were scattered. Hence the coming of the Messiah brings them back. This is about awakening. The witness of the Messiah awakens the people, and the people want to live according to God's ways, which they never did. Okay? So, hope. This word hope is a crucial key. Let me show you why. It's about this king and everything that we explained so far. Go to Romans 8, read verse 24 to 27.
For this hope we were saved, but hope that is not, but let me just read that again. For this hope we were saved, but hope that is seen is not expectation. For when anyone sees, does he expect it? And if we expect what we do not see, we eagerly wait for with endurance. And in the same way, the Spirit does help in our weakness, for we do not know what we should pray, but the Spirit himself pleads our case for us with groanings unutterable. I don't know. And he who searches the heart knows what mind of the Spirit is, because he who makes intercession for the set apart ones according to Elohim.
For we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man sees, why does he yet hope for? What is the hope of these people? They wanted to see the Messiah sit on the throne. They want to see themselves into the kingdom. It's not seen. That is what hope is. Everything is written for our hope, because we are hoping to get under the government rulership that we are now, to inherit the promised land. Romans 13, there's certain things that need to take place, certain attributes that need to fall into a section. You'll see this as we carry on. Every time there's awakening, it's about a fasting. It's a calling together and fast and afflicting, so that we can come and the knowledge of truth and hope on the things to come. What should come? The coming kingdom, the gospel of a kingdom. Okay, this hope.
Jason,
Just on the second point of hope. Sorry, Emmanuel.
what's it called? When it talks about, I know you mentioned Daniel. One indeed believes to eat all food, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. I don't know if we're gonna get there, but where does in Daniel does that speak about?
We'll get there.
Okay.
I'm breaking it down, brother.
Okay.
It's crucial to understand this in Romans 15, this hope, because this is what these people in Romans 14 was hoping for. Because Romans 13 tells you they are oppressed by a king that they don't want to be ruled over. And this king was appointed by them, as their forefathers said they wanted a king appointed above them. And this king is ruling over them, and they're wondering why. But it's because of the covenants locked, and they were not obedient. Okay? So go to 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 12 to 14.
Second Peter chapter 3, 12 to 14.
Yes.
Looking for and hasting the coming of the day of Elohim, through which the heavens shall be destroyed, being set on fire, and the elements melt with intense heat. But according to his promise, we wait for a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, in which righteousness dwells. So then, beloved ones, looking forward to this, do your utmost to be found by him in peace, spotless, and blameless.
A hope of the new kingdom. This is when this kingdom, heaven and earth, is destroyed and the kingdom of the Messiah is established. He will sit on Mount Zion and rule over the 12 tribes of Israel. This is the kingdom that we are hoping for. We don't want to be governed and ruled by these people, just as the Romans did not want to be ruled by Rome. This is the awakening that's happened today, right? So let me not go on. Another example, let me just quickly read it so we can carry on. This hope is crucial because these people are begging on a hope. This is why they are fasting in Romans 14. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, all of it. But I'm just going to read verse 1. Okay? Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, for by its elders obtained a good report. Faith is the things hoped for and not seen. You that confess the Messiah, you are hoping on a kingdom which you have not seen. You're hoping for it. And because you are awakening, you're starting to be obedient. It's to be found without spot and blemish, just like we read, right? So, question is, we've already read about fasting in the prophets. We went to Isaiah. But where else do we read about fasting, right? And fasting, note, fasting always, but always happens to a nation that is awakening. A nation that was lawless and now has come to the knowledge of the truth. And because they've come to the knowledge of truth, they start fasting because they're now reading the truth, a hope of things to come, a kingdom that they want. They want them to see the Messiah come back. They want to be walking like the Messiah without spot and blemish. He was the example, right? So make a note. Where else do we read about fasting? We'll go there now. And fasting always happened when a kingdom awakened. The kingdom that was lost comes to the knowledge of the truth, and then they're awakening. Right. Let me give you a story, just a short background on what I'm saying there. The story of Nehemiah is the story I always tell people. Nehemiah unlocks everything. And Nehemiah is an amazing book if you really understand it. It goes very, very deep. But there's this guy Nehemiah, and he's working under the rulership of a king. And this king is in the time frame area of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the two arms of bronze. That kingdom is the awakening of Nehemiah. They did not keep the law, they did not keep God's ways, and he's awakening. And he asked concerning his brothers that are afflicted by this king Nebuchadnezzar that's appointed over them. Right? This king Nebuchadnezzar took them into Baalan's cup, took them into oppression, and scattered them. And he left a few of his brothers there to work the lands. Right? And Nehemiah asked concerning his brothers, how's it going with my brothers? And he gets a bad report. It's going very hard with them. This king is oppressing them very badly. And Nehemiah calls for awakening. And when Nehemiah does that, he calls for the awakening. They read the Torah. They get the scribes of the lineages of Israel, and they start calling those people back to the land. And when he does that, a fast is called. So, not to make a short story too long or a long story too short. Go to Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 3 and 4.
1, 3, and 4. And they said to me, the remnant who are left of the captivity in the province, or there is a great evil and reproach, and the wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire. And it came to be, when I heard these words, then I sat down and wept and mourned for many days, and I was fasting and praying before Elohim of the heavens.
And Nehemiah sees this happening. He wants knowledge. He's afflicted to see his brothers and sisters in the oppression of the king, like Paul is afflicted to see these people in the oppression of the king, and he answers them. And he sits down and he fasts. Always with awakening comes fasting. This is what I want to show you. This is how you understand Romans. This is the key to everything. Now go to Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 8 through 11.
Please remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you trespass, I shall scatter you among the people. But if you shall turn back to me and guard my commands and do them, though you were cast out of the end of the heavens, I shall gather them from there and bring them to the place which I have chosen to make my name dwell there. And they are your servants and your people, whom you have ransomed by your great power and by a strong hand. Oh yeah, I pray.
That's fine, brother. So Nehemiah is awakening and he sees his brothers that are scattered. And he goes into a fast and eventually calls the nation to fast. And there's awakening happening because fasting goes with awakening. They start reading the Torah, realizing that they've been lied to, realizing why they are scattered, realizing why these kings are ruling over them. They go into a fast. Same as Romans. This is why the Great Commission, go into all nations, preach the gospel of the kingdom. Awakening must happen before this kingdom that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promised land, before you can go into that promised land. Until then, you can't. The awakening needs to happen. It's happening today. People are fasting, keeping the commandments, doing what is good and right in God's eyes, right? What I'm trying to show you is, in Nehemiah, you see, the people were scared, lost. Nehemiah goes into a fast. He calls the people. He says, this is why we are where we are, because we forgot the law of God. We forgot what he commanded Moses. We did our own ways. Now we are scattered, and this king is ruling over us. Nehemiah is a servant in that king's palace. Remember, Nehemiah does not stand up against the king. He never does that. Just like Paul told them in Romans, do not stand up against that king that was appointed by God. He does not do that. He asks permission to go restore the walls. And they give a report that he wants to stand up. And he says, no, no, no. I don't want to stand up against the king. I just want to give glory to my God. And the fast is called. And when this fast is called in Nehemiah, a covenant is locked. But wait a second. I'm not even going to go to scripture. Wasn't the covenant already locked when Moses was there? Now Nehemiah gets awakening and the covenant is locked. And it's called a new covenant. But it's the same God and same laws. But it's called a new covenant because it's locked with different people to the same God. A different generation of those people. But why is it not now called, why isn't that now the second covenant? Because the third covenant is also locked and the fourth one is with the Messiah. Same God, same house rules, everything. But in Nehemiah, this covenant is locked. Nehemiah says, we will lock a covenant with God. We will adhere to these rules and commandments. I digress. Let's carry on. Let's get another example of an awakening happening. Because Romans 13 is about this awakening to understand the fast. Go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 22, 8 through 11.
Okay. And Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the scribe, I have found the book of the Torah in the house of Yah. And the priest gave the book to Shah, and he read it. And Shaphan the scribe came to the king and brought word to the king again, saying, your servant have gathered the silver that was found in the house, and have given it to the hand of those who do the work, who oversee the house of Yah. And Shaphan the scribe informed the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book. And Shaphan read it before the king. And it came to be, when the king heard the words of the book of the Torah, that he tore his garments.
Note, this king appoints some priests, say, go into that house of the Lord, who was so desolate, it was full of dust. And the priest comes and says, we found this book of the covenant, the book of the law, the book of Moses. And the king says, that's interesting, meaning those people did not keep the law. They were scattered, right? And this king tells him, read that book to me, please. And he reads it. And what does he do? He rents his garments. The prophecies later on says, no longer rent your garments, but your hearts. But note, this king finds the Torah, which to them it's new. It's a New Testament because they did not keep it. And he finds it and reads it and he rents his clothes. And he calls all the elders, if you read the whole chapter. He says, we have found this. This is what we should do. No wonder it's going like it's going in the land. It's an awakening. This king is getting awakening. Moses is being read, realizing, we broke this. Better start keeping it so it can go well with us. And see what happens in verse 19. Just read verse 19. Only a fool would say Moses did not exist.
That's okay. That's very funny. That's more laughable. 19. Because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before Yah when you heard what I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that they would become a ruin and a curse, and I have torn your garment and wept before me. I also have heard, declares Yah.
This is why. Because you humbled yourself before me. and realize that the place that you are living on is all ripped apart. It's all scattered and curses, the curses of Deuteronomy 28 from verse 15 to the end. Those curses have come upon them. Just like in Romans, those curses are on the people. Because you have to turn back and accept the Messiah, then he nails that curse to the cross, not beforehand. People don't realize this. But yeah, because thy heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before Yahweh, when thou hardens, when thou heard what I spoke against this place. How did he speak it? He spoke it in Moses. And against the inhabitants thereof, that thou shalt become a desolation and a curse of the Lord. Right? And hast rent thy clothes and wept before me. I also have heard thee, says Yahweh. These people are going through awakening. If you read on, you'll see he also goes through a fast. The whole nation starts fasting. Awakening goes with the fasting because they are under the curse. Someone else is ruling over them and putting a yoke on them. They are ruled and governed by different people, which is not according to the promise of God. Okay? So, just like in Nehemiah, covenant was locked, right? If you go to just quickly, Emmanuel, in Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 37 and 38, you'll see there's also a covenant lock. Let me quickly read it, brother.
Okay.
Because I need to get moving. The power is going to go soon. And it yield much increase into the kings who thou hast set over us, into the kings that you have set over us, because of our sins. Nehemiah. Romans, a king is over them. Nehemiah, a king is over him. And it yield much increase unto the kings who you, Yahweh, have set over us, because of our sins, the curse of the Lord. Also, they have dominion over our bodies and over our cattle at their pleasure. Sorry for that voice. And we are in great distress. And because of all of this, we make sure a covenant and write it. And our princes, Levites, and priests seal it onto us. Nehemiah is acknowledging the problem. Because these kings and rulers are ruling over us, we want to come back into this covenant. It's a new covenant, but the same law. This covenant was locked with Moses. It's locked in 2 Kings. Yeah, it's locked in Nehemiah. It's locked again with the Messiah. It's not a new covenant. It's only new to those who hear it first. If you come to the truth and you keep the law, it's new to you. But it's the same covenant. Hence, it's called a renewed covenant. There are 4 examples of a new covenant in Scripture. Same God, same law, same ordinances. Nothing changes, for your God does not change. This is what I'm trying to show you. Now, in Romans, these people are also under a king. And realizing what Nehemiah. So Nehemiah brings the children back into this covenant. They lock a covenant. They become obedient. Years later, they fall away. Time goes by. Year comes and they fall away. And eventually God writes them a bill of divorce. He divorces them. Now the Messiah comes and he renews the covenant. Same God, same laws. Nothing changed. This is the whole precept of Scripture. This is the Scriptures which we are testing now. Right? So, every time people came back to truth, some form of fasting happened. Like we read in Romans. In Romans, there's oppression. A king, Herod, is ruling over him. Romans chapter 13. They are asking Paul, should we overthrow this king? Paul says, no, do not overthrow the king. This king is appointed by God. Rather go into a fast. Do not rend your garments, but rend your hearts. Romans 14 is about a fast. So we are told by the prophets, remember the New Testament did not exist. Only the Old Testament exists. So in Romans, the New Testament, they are going to the Old Testament to find the answers, and they're asking Paul, right? In the Old Testament, the prophets warn us every time to go through a fasting. Every time there's awakening, the prophets say, you must fast. There's a reason why. This is why the people come to awakening normally want to fast. My brother Emmanuel here just fasted the other day. He's finished, so I can say it. But this is why. So, let me go and show you. Just go to Matthew chapter 6.
Matthew 6.
16 to 18.
16 to 18. And when you fast, do not be sad-faced like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so that they appear to be fasting to men. Truly I say to you, they have the reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in heaven, in a secret place. And your Father who sees in secret shall reward you openly.
Paul speaks about this in Romans 14. Make a note to understand, Paul, you need this, but you need something else too. I'm going to give you the tools to do it now. Just want to see here. It says, Jason, no. I don't know why you're saying that. Romans 14 is about a fast. Sorry, I just want to see here. Jason, Jew is not one in the flesh now.
There's another Jason in here. There's like a guy named actual Jason, yeah.
So it's probably not for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, moreover, when you fast, the Messiah speaking, when you fast, be not as the hypocrites of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou fast, anoint thy head, and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast, but unto the Father which is in secret. And thy Father which sees in secret shall reward openly. This is also in Romans. Do not afflict your brother. How could you afflict your brother if you do not know he's fasting? These people are arguing. You can't eat meat. You should eat vegetables. Why are you looking like this? Is what it's all about. You should not do that. No one should know when you are fasting. For it's a covenant between you and God, not man. You are not here to please man, but to seek the honor of God. Okay? People were looking for example on how to fast. Where did they look? Remember, these people in Romans were looking for example. They're asking for what? And Paul is writing to them. They want an example on how to fast. Where did they look? Remember, the New Testament did not exist, so they went to the prophets. First one, Daniel. Here's your answers, Emmanuel. Awakening. Remember, you fast when there's an awakening happening. It's a repentance, a circumcised heart. So now, just read Daniel 1:1 quickly, just for some context.
Daniel 1:1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Joachim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, sovereign of Babel, came to Jerusalem and besieged it.
Okay, so here it's talking about in the 3rd year of the reign of Joachim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. A king appointed over another king because he's disobedient. Oppression. Something is happening and Daniel has to do something. Just like Nebuchadnezzar had to do something, it's a fast. An awakening is happening. How did Daniel fast? Remember, these people in Romans 14 are going to the prophets to see how the judges, how the prophets fasted, what example there is. How did they do it? So now they're going to Daniel. He's the best example. There's many other examples we'll go to, but Daniel is one, right? So read verse 8 through 16. Slowly, Emmanuel, very slowly. And remember Romans 14, because it's going to start answering. It's going to go ting, ting, ting in your mind. The puzzle is going to start falling in place like this.
You said verse what?
Daniel chapter 1, verse 8 through 16.
Okay. But Daniel laid it upon his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's food, nor with the wine he drank. So he asked permission from the chief of the Enoch not to defile himself. And Elohim granted Daniel loving commitment and compassion from the chiefs of the Enoch. But the chief of the Enoch said to Daniel, I fear my master, the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why would he see your face looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would make my head guilty before the king. And Daniel said to the overseer whom the chief of the Enoch had set over Daniel, Haneth, Mishael, and Azariah, please try your servant for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. And let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of a young man who eat the portion of the king's food, and do with your servants as you see fit. And he listed to them in this matter, and tried them 10 days. And the end of the 10 days, their appearance looked better than the fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's food. And it came to be that the overseer took away the portion of the food and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. And as the 4 young men, Elohim gave them
Is it
knowledge.
going, Emmanuel?
Yeah.
Is it going ting, 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 ting in your mind now?
Yeah. And Elohim gave them knowledge and skill and learning and wisdom. And Daniel understood in all the vision and dreams. And at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, and the chief of the eunuchs brought them before.
That's fine. Only to verse 16, brother. That's fine.
Sorry.
So, why did I go to Romans 13? Because I want to show you it happens in the oppression when a king rules over the children of God when he should not be ruling, because they are waiting, they are awakening, they are waiting for their Messiah to sit on that throne. And when they fall under the rulership of this king, they eat the king's meat and drink the king's wine, because they're under the kingdom of that king. Make note. Daniel comes along and he says, I will not eat of this king's meat and wine and drink. I would rather have something else. Let's test whose fast here is going to be the best. Daniel eats vegetables and he drinks certain things. The people in Romans are reading this and they're asking Paul the same question. They're asking Paul, should we eat meat and drink wine when we are fasting? Because we're under the rulership of Romans 13. The king is ruling over us. And he says, do not judge in drink and wine. It does not matter what you do. Daniel is a good example. You can try what he did, but fasting is not about what you eat or drink. It's about your affliction to God. This is what Paul is trying to tell them. So if you break Daniel down verse for verse, you can start answering Romans. Did you listen? Did you hear it, Emmanuel, when you read now? Did you hear what he was saying?
Yeah.
Meat, drink, wine, everything in Romans.
Vegetables, yeah.
So now go to Daniel chapter 10. Remember, those people at that time are searching the scriptures because there's an awakening. The New Testament did not exist. So they are going to the examples in scripture they do have, like the Old Testament and the prophets, and they are going to Daniel. And when they are going to Daniel and to Isaiah, like we read earlier, they are reading these things and asking Paul concerning these things that is written. So they're asking Paul, but we are living under a rulership of a different king. Can we eat his meat and drink his wine? Daniel didn't. Why should we? And Paul says, don't worry. Do not judge each other. That's not what the fast is about. All foods are clean in God's eyes. All food. What is ordained at food?
That's the all
Not
food is
swine,
clean
not
in the
pig.
context of fasting, I see.
Yep. This is what they're thinking, because they're asking questions regarding the scriptures they have. And this is why I took you to Romans 13 to understand. It's all about a kingdom and rulers and who they are under. Like Daniel is here under Nebuchadnezzar. And he's doing certain things. And these people are pulling to Daniel for the example, because he was the best example. When Daniel fasted, his servants looked greater than the servants of the king. These people are living under rulership, oppression of the Roman Empire. They are not looking very well. They are treated as slaves. They are treated as dogs. They want to go through that fast to establish a kingdom. They want to look better than the king's people. Now they're asking. Daniel did not eat the meat of the king. Daniel didn't drink that king's wine. Do not let someone tell you. Don't be a stumbling block to your brother. Tell him that you can't eat the king that rules in your country fast, his meat and wine. You must go grow your own. You can do anything. The fast is not about what you're eating and drinking. It's never been about that. It's about your affliction to the Most High. It's about your covenant you're making with him. Father, please, I will for a week no longer drink. I need an answer for this in my life. Do not break that covenant, otherwise the answer won't come. This is what it's about. It's not about what you eat or drink. If you're a stumbling block to your brother like they were, now imagine this, Emmanuel. These people in Romans are waking up, Romans 14, and they are arguing, quarreling under each other concerning what we've just read in Daniel. And you, Emmanuel, are fasting, and you're saying, no. You know what? I'm Emmanuel. I'm not gonna eat meat. I'm just gonna eat vegetables. So why are you doing that, Emmanuel? You can eat meat or drink vegetables. It doesn't matter. And you're gonna tell me, no, but Jason, in Daniel, he didn't eat the meat of the king. And I'm saying, well, that's not the point, Emmanuel. Now I'm being a stumbling block. I have to say, no, he is weak in faith. Fine, it's your fast. Fast as you want. But do not look at your brother and think that because he's fasting in a certain way, he's doing it wrong. That's not what it's about. Okay, so Daniel chapter 10, verse 2 through 4.
Okay, 2 to 4. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning 3 weeks of days, and I did not desire food, and meat and wine did not come into my mouth, and I did not anoint myself at all till the completion of the 3 weeks of days. And on the 24th day of the first new moon, while I was by the side of the great river of Hiddekel, sorry. That's it.
Why is Daniel fasting? He's under the oppression and the rulership of Nebuchadnezzar. He is the one that they are asking Paul of. Remember, I said in the beginning, Paul's letters are hard to understand, and the question we need to ask is, why are they hard to understand? And then we went to 1 Corinthians and we got a message there. Paul saying, I'm writing to you these things concerning that which you wrote to me. Well, what did they write to Paul? Where are those letters? Because that will put everything in context, but we don't have them. That's why Paul is hard to understand. Now, because you are instructed in the Torah, you've read the Old Testament and you abide by it, you can discern good from evil. You know in Romans 14 is not speaking about clean and unclean animals. You know it's speaking about fasting because you've read it and you've gone through it. You've gone through sanctification. Now, in Daniel's time, he's under the rulership of Nebuchadnezzar, and the awakening happens, and Daniel fasts. These people in Romans 14 are under the oppression of King Herod. They're waiting for the Messiah to come back. And Paul is instructing them, awakening, and Paul is instructing them, and they want to know questions about fasting because they are reading what we read now, and they think this is how you should fast. And fasting is not about that. Fasting is not about food and drink. Fasting is about your covenant you're making with God, regardless of what you decide it is. It's a heart circumcision. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Remember. Now, with this says, this must have let some bells go off already, Emmanuel, in your mind.
Yeah, what you just mentioned about fast is not important, and we read that in Isaiah, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's all
We
I
read it
wanted to know.
earlier in Isaiah.
Yeah,
I'm just
Isaiah
going to different
58.
prophets.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Okay.
now, I want you to go to the book of Job.
Job?
Yes. Chapter 2.
Joe or Job?
Joel. Joel.
Okay, Joel.
Not
Okay,
Job.
right.
Joel. Yes. Chapter 2, verse 10 to 18.
Joel chapter 2, verse 18. So it's sometimes
Verse
hard to
10
hear.
to 18.
10 to 18, okay.
Yes.
The earth shall tremble before them, and the heavens shall shake. Sun and moon shall be darkened, and the stars withdraw their brightness. And Yah shall give forth his voice before his army. For his camp is very great, for mighty is the doer of his word. For the day of Yah is great and very awesome. Who does bear it? Yet even now, declares Yah, turn me with all your heart with fasting, and with weeping and with mourning. And tear your heart and not your garments, and turn back to Yah, your Elohim, and he shows favor and is compassionate, patient, and a great loving commitment, and he shall relent concerning the evil. Who knows? He might turn the relent and leave the blessing behind him, and grain offering and drink offering for Yah, your Elohim. Blow a shofar in Zion, set apart a fast, call an assembly, gather the people, set the assembly apart, assemble the elders, gather the children and nursing babies. Let a bridegroom come out from his room, and a bride from her dressing room. You said to 16, right?
To 18.
Okay. Let the priest servant Let the priest servant of Yah weep between the porch and the slaughter place, and let them say, Spare your people, O Yah, and do not give your inheritance to reproach, for the nation to rule over them. Why should they say among the people, Where is their Elohim? And let Yah be jealous for his land and spare his people.
This was the whole summary of Romans 13, 14, and 15. Remember now, if you read Joel from where we said, right, from verse 10, it's speaking about the end days, judgment day that's happening. And it says, when you know this is happening and you see the time is near, what must you do? Call a fast. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Call everyone together and fast. What is happening in Romans? And then it tells you in the end of Job, because they are oppressed by the kings, right? We'll read it again now. So in Romans 13, you see they are oppressed by King Herod. They want to call on a fast because they are like the Bereans searching the scriptures. The New Testament did not exist. So they are reading the Old Testament. And when they are reading Job, like we are reading now. And they're realizing a fast needs to be called. Okay, so we must rend our hearts. Okay, where's the example of the fast? Oh, it's in Daniel. Now they're asking Paul concerning this fast because they don't want King Herod to rule over them. They want their Messiah. And now because they are asking Paul this, they are calling on a fast. And because they are calling on a fast, they want to know how to fast. Now they're going to Daniel for the example. And Paul is writing them concerning Joel and Daniel. Joel is to call the fast because they don't want to be ruled by a different king. Daniel is the example, and Paul is answering them concerning the example they are using in Daniel. That's what Romans 14 is about. It's not about food. It's never been about food. It's about fasting because the context is key. The context is Romans 13. A king that is ruling over you that should not be ruling, that is oppressing you, just like happened in King Daniel. What did these people do? There was an awakening. King Herod was ruling over them. They are searching the scriptures. So here they are reading Joel and they're saying, before the Messiah can come and judgment day comes, we must call a fast. Okay, let's call a fast. Okay, brothers, let's fast. Now they start asking, how should we fast? What is the fast about? People go through it today. Where's the example? They go to Daniel. And because Daniel only ate vegetables, they think this is how you should fast. When it's got nothing to do with a fast. This is what Paul is answering them in Romans 14 about. Because, listen, we don't have the letters concerning their questions to Paul. We have to now, because we are instructed in the law. Paul says, do you not know, brothers, I speak to those who know the law. Because we know the law, we realize, yeah, they are speaking about a Daniel fast. These people had an argument on what to fast on. It was never about food, clean and unclean animals. Because all food are clean in God's eye. What is food according to Scripture? Leviticus 11. A pig was never ordained as food. Never. But because we have now discerning spirits, we are obedient and instructed in God's ways. We can discern good from evil. What is evil? Christians say it's about food, clean and unclean animals. Good? Good is what I've just shown you. We've used Scripture to explain it. So, with this in mind, read Joel again, Emmanuel, but very slowly.
Okay, Joel.
I'll read it quickly and then we can go back and read Romans 14 with all this knowledge.
Okay.
Right? The earth shall quake before them. The heavens shall tremble. The sun and the moon shall be darkened. So it's talking about end days. New heaven, new earth. Sun and moon will no longer give its light. And the stars shall withdraw their shining. Remember Revelation? And yeah, let me just read. This is a King KJV translation. So excuse the words, the Lord and all of that crap. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army. For his camp is very great. For he is strong that exalts his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible. And who can abide it? Therefore also now, says the Lord, turn you even to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, and with mourning. Romans, they want to get out of that rulership of Herod. They are reading this. They want the Messiah to come, but he has not yet come. Even in their time, he has not yet come. Right? And rend your hearts and not your garments. Remember the king in 2 Kings rendered his garment. He says, no, the last day is fast and rend your hearts. Okay, and not your garments. And turn unto Yahweh, your Elohim. I'm just replacing the word, sorry. I can't read that, Lord and God. I can't. For he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and repents them of evil. So turn back to Yahweh. You've got a king ruling over you. Turn back to Yahweh by fasting, so that you can have the coming of the Son. That's the awakening. There's a great awakening. A remnant will be over, and they'll give awakening. They'll sing a song of Moses, right? Who knows if he will return and repent and leave a blessing behind him? Even what? Even I meat offering and a drink offering unto Yahweh your Elohim. Blow the trumpet in Zion. Remember we read in Isaiah earlier about blowing the trumpet when you are fasting. Warn others. It's about a returning back. Blow the trumpet. What are we doing? We're blowing the trumpet, warning you. Listen here. Turn back to your Father who is in heaven. His law still applies. Turn back. Awakening. Blow the trumpet. Remember we read it earlier in Isaiah. Sorry, man. Blow the trumpet in Zion. Sanctify a feast. Call a solemn assembly. Gather the people. Teach them. Right? Gather the people. It's in the next verse anyway, 16. Gather the people. Sanctify the congregation. Assemble the elders. Gather the children and those that suck their breasts. Let the bridegroom go forth of his chamber and the bride out of her closet. Let the priests, the ministers of Yahweh, weep between the porch and the altar, and let them say, spare thy people, O Yahweh. Why must they be spared? In Romans, they're under the rulership of Herod. They're being oppressed. Spare thy people, and give not thy heritage to reproach, that the heathen shall rule over them. King Herod, the Edomite, he's ruling over them. Romans 14, the fast. 13, Herod is ruling. Right? This is what they are reading. This is why they are fasting. They're reading the prophets because the New Testament did not exist. So they're searching the scriptures like the Bereans. Wherefore should they say among the people, where is our God? Then will Yahweh be jealous for his land and pity his people. Yahweh will be jealous for his land and pity his people. A gospel of a kingdom. What are we reading, people? Do we realize what we are reading? If you know that the time is near and the repentance, the remnant spoken about in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 28 to 29, the last generation is waking up. What happens? We are blowing the trumpet. You see these tall trees, they are blowing the trumpet. And now we call a fast. But the fast is now all over because the temple is all over. It's no more in one place because you are scattered. A gathering is going to happen and a big fast is going to happen. This is when the Messiah returns. But don't want to get off topic. Romans 13. A King Herod is ruling over them. They are oppressed. They want to get out of it. They're reading Joel, realizing, we must call a fast. Asking, okay, let's call a fast. How do we fast? There's examples. Daniel. Daniel is about fasting on fruit, vegetables, and water. Not the king's things, meat and wine. Now, with this understanding, Emmanuel, that we have now, let's go back and read Romans chapter 14, the whole chapter. Remember everything we just went through. I know it's hard. I hope
I'll try my best. Yeah, I'll try to remember to quote all the
but
scriptures.
you'll see how it falls in place with the knowledge. Remember, every time, sometimes you read a scripture just before you read. Sometimes you'll read Genesis. And years go by, and eventually you get to Revelation or wherever you are. Let's say 2 years go by, and you go back and you read Genesis. All of a sudden, you're reading Genesis and you realize, how did I miss this? I've read this book before, but now I missed so many things. Now I have a revelation in Genesis, which I never had. Why does that happen? Because your knowledge has increased throughout Scripture. Now you can understand Genesis better. Now this is what is happening now. I'm applying this knowledge that was increasing now about Romans 14, and we read the prophets, and we read the awakening of Nehemiah, what the prophet said. With this knowledge that is now increased, we have to go back and read Romans and see if we can get that aha moment. Not about food, about fasting. So with this knowledge, if you apply everything I just said and showed you in scripture, and you read it now, it's impossible to be about clean and unclean animals. So go and read and see if you can, if you paid attention and noted, if you
So
can snap what
Jason,
it
do you
is
remember
saying.
when we read Enoch about the white thing? I'm gonna do the same thing
Yes.
now, and I'm gonna go through it, and I'm gonna tell you what I see the same way I did that day. So
All
just
right.
for 13, when we read them waking up and going and they're asking at the end of 13 from 12 to 14 about let us walk becomingly and make no provision for sin, and that they're waking up. That's Nehemiah, if I'm saying it correctly, in 2 Kings, will be people waking up. So we're not reading 13 right now, but just from 14 onward, we'll do the same thing. Romans 14:1. And receive him who is weak in the faith, not criticizing his thoughts. One indeed believes to eat all food, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. He that eats, let him not despise him who does not eat, and he that does not eat, let him not judge him who eats. For Elohim received him. And we see this in Daniel and also in Isaiah. Isaiah 58. I personally quoted 1 to 9. And then we continue, and it goes, who are you that judge another's servants? To his own master he stands or falls, but he shall be made stand. For Elohim is able to make him stand. One indeed judges one day above another, another judges every day alike. Let each one be completely persuaded in his own mind. For 5 and
Why
6,
does one judge one day above another, Emmanuel? It's Isaiah 58, verse 13, which we just read, 13 and
so
14.
when it says, if you turn back your foot from the Shabbat and you don't do your own pleasures, that's what it's talking about from what I
These
see.
people in Romans are thinking that they must fast on the Sabbath because Isaiah speaks about fasting and it compares the Sabbath to it, when that's not about fasting. So one day will aspise one day above another. One day will uphold a day over another. Others will fast only on the Sabbath, and others will fast in any day, depending on your knowledge, your faith. Do not let it become sin for you. Remember? Carry on.
He who minds the day minds it to Yah, and he who does not mind the day to Yah, he does not mind it. He who eats, eats to Yah, for he gives Elohim thanks. He who does not eat to Yah, he does not eat and give Elohim thanks. For not one of us lives to himself, and not one of us dies to himself. For if we live unto the Master, and if we die unto the Master. Therefore we live or we die, we are the Master's. For unto this Messiah died and rose to live again, to rule over both the dead and the living. But why do you judge your brother, or why do you despise your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Elohim. And this is, I guess, what I see referring to Matthew 6, when we're not supposed to tell people that we're fasting. So why do people judge each other based on that? For it has been written, as I live, says Yah, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to Elohim. Each one of us, therefore, shall give account of himself to Elohim. Therefore, let us not judge one another any longer, but rather judge this, not to put an obstacle and a stumbling block in our brother's way. And we were talking about this when we were saying, again, referring to Matthew 6, how can you go to your brother and say you're doing this wrong and this wrong when we have this example, but one person sees to eat meat in a certain way or fast in a certain way, so we can't judge people on that.
Yes.
I can't answer verse 14 because I personally, my translation says common, so I don't know what that means. And it says, I know I'm persuaded in the Master Yeshua that none at all is common of itself, but to him who regards whatever to be common, it is common. I don't know what that means, and I don't know what it's referring to common.
Pure, for meat destroys not the word, verse 14. I know, sorry, let me just scroll up.
It's okay.
I know, and I'm pursued by the Master Yeshua, that there is nothing unclean in itself.
Okay. My translation is common, so it's referring to unclean. Well, that's easy to answer. No food. No, that's very easy to answer. No, there's no food, actual food that is unclean, that God has made clean. It's not unclean. So that's what it's referring to. And you mentioned that a
So,
couple times.
so when you are fasting, like if you want to fast the Daniel fast, for example, do not think if you eat meat that means unclean while you are fasting. No food is unclean, for God ordained all food in Leviticus 11. Everything God ordained to be as food is clean. You can't do anything to make it unclean, is what it's saying.
Verse 15, if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking in love. Do not by your food ruin the one of whom Messiah died. Do not then allow your good to be spoken of evil. For the reign of heaven is not eating and drinking, but righteousness and peace and joy in set apart spirit. For he who is
Hang
serving.
on. The reign of heaven is not eating and drinking. What are they waiting for? The new kingdom to come down? What are they doing? Fasting. And they think of that fasting is about eating and drinking. That's not what fasting is about. Daniel used that as a fast. Isaiah speaks about food as a fast, but fasting is not about eating and drinking. It's about rending your hearts and not your garments.
So when it says for the reign of God, for the kingdom of God, I see that as referring to the actual like kingdom, like after or in the 1,000-year reign or after. You know what I mean? The renewed. Is that
But
wrong?
remember what we went through earlier. We read verse 15, and it's about a hope of things to come.
Correct.
This hope is the kingdom because the people are living under the rulership of King Herod, which is an Edomite, not out of Judah, not the one to sit on the throne of David, the Messiah. So that hope of a kingdom, the kingdom is not of food and drink. The kingdom is within. Rend your hearts, not your garments.
Okay. And we read that also in Hebrews and in Daniel, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Where is it? Where we were at? Okay, right here. For he was serving Messiah in these matters as well pleasing to Elohim and approved by men. So then let us pursue the matters of peace and matters for building up one another. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of good food. All indeed are clean, but evil to the man who eats so as to cause stumbling. It is good not to eat meat or drink wine, nor whatever by which your brother stumble. This is referring to what we read a couple minutes ago.
But it's saying there, all are indeed clean. What is clean? Leviticus 11 tells you what clean food. So all foods are clean. So then the next
During the
verse,
fast.
if you say it's about unclean animals, the next verse is contrary to it, speaking about meat and wine. What wine is unclean? That's
Yeah.
that's where the big hint lies. Carry on.
It is good not to eat meat or drink wine, nor to do whatever by which your brother stumble. Do you have faith? Have it for yourself before Elohim. Blessed is he who does not condemn himself in what he approves. But he who doubts if he eats is condemned because it is not of faith at all. That is not of faith, it is sin. So this is referring to when you're fasting. If I'll give you an example just in my personal life. When I'm fasting, I chose to do like something like I'm not gonna do a specific thing. And then if I go, damn, I shouldn't have done that. Like maybe I should have just did a normal fast. That would be little faith, and that equals to my sin.
Yes,
Is that
if
right?
you
I don't know if that makes sense, but in my brain it does at least.
yes, if you are fasting and you fasting is a covenant you make with God. That's what fasting is about. Father, I will do this, but I need this. I need an answer for this, so I'm fasting for this. Now you make a covenant. Pay your covenants to God. If you said you're fasting for 3 days, see it through. Otherwise, it becomes sin unto you because you've just told God that you'll do something and you're not doing it. You're supposed to pay your covenants to God, right?
Correct.
That's what it's about. So don't be very ambitious when you are little in faith. Do not think, I'm new to this and I'm little in faith. I'm going to fast for a week without water. Have you gone 2 days without water?
Mm.
Don't be overconfident, those who are little in faith. If you fasted many times before, you can go about 6, 7 days without water and just eat. Or you can go a guy that I know 47 days without food. That is someone that has grown in his faith. He knows what it takes. He's seeking deeper answers. But if you're small and little in faith and you want to fast only on vegetables and only for 2 days, good for you. Start small. And with your faith grows, you'll start doing it bigger and bigger because you need bigger and bigger answers. Your affliction becomes better. Now, rend your hearts and not your garments. It's not about what other people see and putting ash on your head and rending your garments so everyone can see you fasting. It's about your
Isaiah.
answer. It's
Wow.
in the hand.
Okay. I see. Okay, Isaiah. Damn. That makes a little bit. That makes not a little bit more sense, but what you just mentioned makes a lot of sense.
Emmanuel, what I'll do is
Mm,
I'll take this whole teaching that we just did now and post it onto YouTube
awesome.
because I know the first time you hear something you catch but not properly, and the second time, and then eventually when that penny drops, you realize, aha, that's when you get that aha moment, when everything opens, that what you call it, that revelation. And once you see from the beginning why I spend so much time not speaking about fasting, giving you the background of where these people are, you realize how important this is. Without that background, you could not unlock what we are unlocking now.
So can I ask a question? When it talks about in Romans 13, and you mentioned this a couple times, Herod's,
King
just
Herod.
just yeah, just for the sake of it, in the sense of someone asked me, oh, it's King Herod. Where do I find that it's King Herod? Because bro, just to like cover every like nook and cranny, if that makes any sense.
It's in the reign of the Messiah. It's in the New Testament. If you want me to add it, I'll add it to it. But I normally speak with the assumption that people know this. King Herod. Let me just say, Father, let us for the past works of darkness. I'm not finding it now, but it's
Yeah,
in
bro,
Matthew.
just send it to me on WhatsApp whenever you have time. It's just that was more something I know as someone will come and ask me, because I just know that someone one day will,
The
hey,
Messiah says something in the sense of, go tell that dog, that king,
oh,
that
in
dog.
Matthew. Are you talking about Matthew?
Just go there quickly. I think there's a verse there.
I think it's around Matthew, because I know that's that dog, right? I remember we were talking about this a couple weeks ago. You brought up this
Yeah,
scripture.
I'll try and find it now. Nah, can't
It
find it.
is fine. It's not a right now thing. It's just more of a question that I've had.
No, it doesn't say that dog. Go find that. Go tell that jackal. Sorry, I think it's jackal, not dog. I misquoted, I think. Can someone find it for us quickly?
Um, yeah, no.
Luke 13:22.
Okay.
Listen, Emmanuel, when we read it, I need to go, brother.
Okay, no problem. And he was going through the city of the village, teaching and journeying towards Jerusalem. And some said to him, Master, are you few who are saved? And he said, 13:22. No, that's not it.
Carry on reading.
And some of them said, Master, there are few who are being saved. And he said to them, Strive to enter through the narrow gate, because many, I say to you, shall seek to enter in it and shall not be able. When one of the master of the house has risen up and shut the door, and you begin standing outside and knock at the door, saying, Master, Master, and open
No,
for
it's not
us.
that.
Yeah. Oh,
No, it's
32.
not that. 32. They're saying
Yeah,
32.
it's right here. And he said to them, Go say to that fox or that jackal, See, I cast out demons, perform healing today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected.
If you go read somewhere there, it speaks about that fox or jackal is Herod, an Edomite.
Yeah,
It's
it's
in that
probably a
chapter
couple
somewhere.
chapters before when it talks about
Yes, but I think it's in the same chapter, speaking about that king and that rulership of the Messiah.
verse 31. Herod's wishes
Yes,
to kill you. Yeah.
yes.
Okay,
That
just
jackal, that Herod is the one that is ruling over them in that time.
yeah, that's the only thing I had.
Yeah. I hope this helped you, brother. I'll post it on YouTube. You can go watch it again, especially for the notes, because there's many notes that you need to make and reread over and over to understand what I'm saying. Especially if you realize in the beginning of the video, I've given you all the answers without you noticing it. You'll see the answers are there.
Okay.
Okay. Hope this helped you, brother.
It
Next
did.
time, but it helps you in a way that you know it's not talking about food, but it takes a great level of discernment to realize what is being said, because, like I said in the beginning, Paul is answering people who wrote to him concerning something, and Paul is writing back to them. But what they wrote, we do not know. We only have the letters of Paul. We don't have the letters written to Paul. So we have to discern what he's speaking about, like I showed you in the beginning of the video. And this is the only way you can do it, is by realizing what he's speaking. So if you are taught in the law and the prophets, and you read scripture, you can now discern good from evil. So when it's speaking about something, it will ring a bell and say, okay, there it's talking about the fast of Daniel. There it's talking about the fast that the Messiah was speaking about. You can start realizing what he's saying and what questions was asked for him to give them that response, if you know what I'm saying.
I do. I appreciate it truly. And when it comes to like our private teaching, we'll do that. Continue that next week.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I'll probably I need to just sort some stuff out with my kids and do some couple of things with them. And once I'm done, I'll probably jump on later tonight. We can carry on speaking about it. I don't mind.
Are you sure? Because I mean, for you, Shabbat, kind of want to give you some rest, brother.
It's nearly the end of Shabbat now.
Okay. My bad. Yeah. I hope you have a good day.
Thanks, brother. Keep well. Thank you all. Keep well. Chat soon.